Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1213 of the War News stream. And we have very big news tonight coming out of the Middle East. Right now, we're seeing that Iran and Israel are exchanging massive missile attacks yet again into the night. We're also seeing U.S. military deployments flood into the Middle East even more. And also, U.S. officials are preparing for intervention very soon in the Middle East. And we have big news, and it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world, as we have been able to hear significant developments from Eastern Europe, the Middle East, and East Asia in a very small amount. But beyond that, we have absolutely massive news coming out of the area of the Middle East as well as Eastern Europe at the same time, as we have been able to hear that inside the Middle East, Israeli armed forces have continued to hit and target multiple forces of the Iranian armed forces in terms of air defense, and we've also been able to hear of air defense fire near to the area of Bushehr, suggesting that the city came under fire not too long ago by Israeli air forces. Not only that, we have also been able to hear that Khameini did survive last night's airstrike, which we covered live on air when it happened, and we have been able to hear that while he did survive, it now appears that Khameini is now going radio silent to try and not broadcast his location to the open outside world, including the Israelis and future U.S. involvement, to avoid having a bomb once again dropped incredibly close or right on top of him inside of the bunker that he's inside of LAvizan at this moment. We have also been able to get additional news that U.S. naval assets have finally moved into position off of the coast of Israel in the form of Arleigh Burke-class destroyers to be able to provide an additional air defense shield in the support of the state of Israel, most likely using SM-2 and SM-3 anti-ballistic missiles to be able to shoot down the incoming Iranian barrages. However, Israel has taken damage today, as we were able to hear that more Iranian ballistic missile barrages have been fired, and while the Israeli Air Force has been attempting to destroy a significant number of those ballistic missile launchers, the Iranians are still starting to move into keeping up a more significant missile volley fire. transpire. We have been able to see that there have been hits inside of Tel Aviv. There were also a few hits inside of the Be'er-Sheva area that we were not able to show on stream tonight, and there was also some hits inside of Haifa as well, largely showing that within all three major areas of Israel, the Iranians were able to land several hits over the course of the day. Outside of that, Israel has also targeted and killed a Hezbollah artillery commander within the southern area of Lebanon, and we are also hearing that future U.S. involvement is a damn near certainty at this point, as we have been able to hear that more U.S. Air Forces have been taking off from air bases inside of the U.K. and have been basing inside of the EUCOM area of responsibility in preparation to make their final jaunt and leg of the journey into the Middle East, but prepared for those future actions. That is also coming as the United States of America has given its final ultimatum to the Islamic Republic of Iran, stating that if the Iranians do not accept this ultimatum at face value without any negotiations, the United States of America will move forward into actions it deems necessary for the security of the United States of America and American interests within the Middle East. We have also been able to hear ongoing developments inside of the Ukraine war, as we've been able to hear that the Ukrainian armed forces have continued their defenses of the significant cities of Toretsk and Pokrovsk and have continued to inflict casualties on the Russian forces. We have also seen that the small and limited Ukrainian offensives in the Kursk Oblast have continued to hit and destroy Russian forces within the interior of the Russian Federation's frontier oblasts. At the same time, we have also been able to see in very interesting footage today, a Shahed 136 drone being destroyed by an F-16. And one of the few times we've ever seen on film, Dutch-provided F-16s to the Ukrainian Air Force ever shooting down drones on film. We have also been able to see inside of Moscow that the Russian Federation is making continuously more provocative and alarming statements, including statements that if a Russian soldier has set foot on any territory at any point in history, the Russian Federation considers that land to be theirs, including the entirety of Eastern Europe and Central Asia. We have also been able to hear that the Russian Federation, through the president of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, also stated that all of Ukraine is considered to be a part of Russia, once again throwing out the idea or concept that was entertained by U.S. negotiators for some time, though the Russian Federation would only would actually agree to only taking smaller parts of Ukraine instead of the entirety of the country. We also have been able to hear in East Asia that the People's Republic of China is not going to be getting involved in any way, shape, or form in the ongoing Israel-Iran conflict, as we have been able to hear that Chinese strategic fuel reserves have reached their maximum capacity nearly, and at this point, the People's Republic of China does not consider the situation with Iran or a possible regime change to be a vital strategic concern to the People's Republic of China, as they will no longer be requiring a significant influx of raw petroleum to be refined at Chinese refineries to be able to build up oil reserves and maintain a economic stability that we are currently seeing at this point due to the stable fuel prices inside the People's Republic of China, meaning that the Chinese will not be getting involved. We have a huge amount of news today, and these are just the major pieces of the news that we're about to be covering, but this is absolutely massive news, and we will be moving on into our largest piece of news for the night, which is, as a matter of fact, the U.S. final ultimatum that has been issued. We have been able to hear and see multiple times in the past that the United States of America has attempted, even in the current strikes, to actually entertain or at least suggest the idea of possible future negotiations with the Islamic Republic of Iran to see that the conflict that is still raging at this moment would be brought to a peaceful resolution. That quite clearly will not be happening at this point, as the Islamic Republic of Iran has made it clear throughout the day that they do not trust the United States or Israel, and they will not be ceding on any ballistic missile developments or missile development programs in general, and will never dismantle their nuclear program entirely, and will never secede or can make a concession where they stop the development of enriched uranium fuels to any enrichment grade. The United States later today, just a few hours ago, actually issued its final ultimatum, and this is the ultimatum that follows. The United States is demanding an end to all uranium enrichment inside of the Islamic Republic of Iran, a slash to long-range missile programs, including those researching intermediate-range ballistic missiles and intercontinental ballistic missiles, which could be used to mount nuclear warheads on board and then fire those either at European countries inside of Europe or at the United States directly. And we have also been able to hear that they are now demanding a dismantlement of key nuclear infrastructure. The Israelis believe at the moment that if the Iranians reject, the U.S. will enter the war. Turkey, Oman, Italy, and Norway have offered to host the talks between the Iranians and the United States, but the Iranians have never responded to this ultimatum, even when it was made just a few hours ago. It does appear that based off of that, the United States is seriously considering armed action, and at least according to statements by the Vice President of the United States, it is becoming increasingly clear that this is the action that will follow. The Vice President, J.D. Vance of the United States, stated that if the President of the United States concludes that diplomacy is ineffective and negotiations are unproductive, he will take appropriate action. Once again, largely underlying a armed action by the United States of America against the Islamic Republic of Iran if the ultimatum is not accepted. And at this point, it does appear that the Islamic Republic of Iran has already rejected the ultimatum issued by the United States earlier today. Outside of that, we were also able to hear that diplomats of multiple Western countries are already speaking about confidential conversations about who would lead Iran next and whether the nuclear site's material inside of Iran could be secured by forces either on the ground or elsewhere. We've also been able to see more U.S. force deployments within the area, and we were able to see pictures from over the United Kingdom today showing KC-46 Stratotankers flying outbound from the UK towards the Middle East, followed by F-22s with external fuel tanks attached. It does make it incredibly and increasingly clear that the United States of America is moving significant air assets into the Middle East, as we can see in these pictures here, and are once again showing us that they are preparing a large air action, largely operated by the U.S. Air Force and Navy at this moment, to be able to prepare for an eventual hostile action against Iran. And largely, the ultimatum that's being issued right now is once again to get a very clear picture of the casus belli that we'll be invoking against the Iranians here soon, and also allowing for air forces to get into position. Not only that, but satellite photography of European air bases is showing a wildly significant buildup from prior days. This is the Aviano air base inside of Italy on the 11th of June. As you can see, there were largely not a great number of aircraft present, and in the 18th of June, we can see that 6 KC-135 Stratotankers and 1 C-17 Globemaster were now apparent on the tarmac of the Aviano air base inside of Italy, once again showing us where all of those U.S. Stratotankers and Globemasters that took off from the United States went, at least in this one particular air base's instance. Also, we were able to see that in Gania in Greece, there was once again another significant presence of U.S. Air Force buildups within this airbase as well, as we were able to see 1 KC-46, 1 KC-135, another C-17 Globemaster, and 5 C-130 Hercules, mostly transport aircraft, also based at the Gania or the Chania air base inside of Greece. Once again, making it more pressingly clear that U.S. Air Force assets are beginning to move into Europe and are making their final jaunts and legs on their flights into the Middle East, most likely to be based in a location like Saudi Arabia, or possibly to even be based out of Europe itself, or EUCOM's area of responsibility, but still being put under CENTCOM's area of responsibilities command. We also were able to see more picture evidence showing us a marked increase of air presence and aircraft at other air bases throughout Europe, and it does appear that at least at this one particular air base, although the footage is very blurry, it appears to be a marked increase of C-17 Globemaster strategic airlift aircraft that are used to transport large amounts of ground equipment from the United States and into other areas of responsibility, such as EUCOM, Indo-PACOM, or CENTCOM at the moment. It is making it
It's really wild. It's really wild to see this much equipment being sent to so many different bases in Europe, knowing that they're trying to head to the Middle East. At this point, like seeing this much stuff on the move, it's kind of hard to say that war is not inevitable at this point. I've seen some people saying that, oh, you know, the president's going for peace. He wants to be the peacemaker and things like that. This is really not what you'd call preparations for peacemaking. This is preparations for a straight up total war. So I would say at this point, it's looking extremely likely, like higher than 70%, that we're probably going to war with Iran. You don't make this many troop deployments and force deployments and equipment deployments like this unless you're planning on actually going to war.
And even still, we are seeing on flight radar, to add on to that, that there are a large amount of C-17 Globemasters that have been ferrying equipment into specifically Saudi Arabia and Jordan and then flying right back out. We can see here that the U.S. airlifts to the Middle East continue overnight, with 5 USAF C-17 Globemaster 3s operating between Europe and the region, and making a new appearance is a U.S. Navy C-130T Hercules out of Bahrain, which appears to have taken off from Bahrain and is now heading to Europe. We have been able to hear that U.S. Air Forces and naval assets have been leaving Bahrain and Qatar at the moment to get out of the way of fire. They are incredibly close to Iran at the moment, and if the Iranians were to try and conduct a preemptive first strike, it is possible that they could land some hits onto those U.S. naval and air assets within the area and cause a decent amount of damage. One other thing to note, though, that is important is that these C-17 Globemasters on flight radar with their transponders on have made round trips from European air bases. It appears air bases inside of the UK into the Middle East, and then afterwards they then took off and returned right back to Europe. This is showing that these stratotankers are actually dropping off equipment, ground forces equipment and supplies into the area of Saudi Arabia and Jordan at the moment, which is once again showing us that not only is there an Air Force buildup, but there appears to be a significant buildup of Army forces on the ground as well inside of Saudi Arabia and Jordan, which are getting their equipment and personnel dropped off by the Air Force on this very day. We have also been able to hear that U.S. aircraft were taking off from the area of Qatar. No specific airbase was specified. It just appears to be all air bases, and it does seem that that's still following the action of the U.S. Navy and Royal Navy assets that it left Bahrain and Qatar earlier to make a break out of the Strait of Hormuz and into the open sea to avoid future encirclement if a conflict was to begin at any moment. We also know that the USS Nimitz Carrier Strike Group is going to be arriving soon within the next 2 days into the area and will join CENTCOM's area of responsibility, and will also join the USS Carl S. Vinson, still in theater at the moment, to prepare for air operations against the Islamic Republic of Iran, meaning that there are now a significant number of offensive and defensive aircraft inside of the Middle East that the United States has moved into the area that are a part of the Air Force. There appears to be a significant amount of U.S. Army ground personnel in the area as well, most likely operating air defense systems that are being dropped off by those C-17s, such as THAAD batteries or Patriots, and we're also seeing that 2 carrier strike groups housing around 170 aircraft each, or about 150 aircraft each, are also now within the Arabian Sea at this moment, and also within CENTCOM's area of responsibility. It is becoming more pressingly clear at this moment that the U.S. ultimatum does have teeth, at least for now. The United States has moved in such a large amount of air and ground assets that it would be pretty difficult for the Iranians to ever launch a successful strike against the U.S. forces in the region, and not only that, it would be increasingly difficult for the Iranians to deal with such an overwhelming air superiority presence that will be felt over Iran in the near future, considering that the ultimatum has now been rejected. But this is leading a lot of people to talk about what's going on with that ultimatum, for the large part, that the United States has issued to the Iranians about stopping multiple different programs, including their key crown jewel nuclear program. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
All right. So today we did hear reports that apparently the Iran peace talks have ended in Geneva after Iranian officials refused to stop enriching uranium. And what are your thoughts about that development? So 67% said Iran will stay the course on this and basically fight to the death, apparently is what they're planning to do, while 19% said Iran will change its mind very soon after they see the massive force deployments, and 9% said it's a 50-50 chance of a change very soon. And at this point, I think Iran has gotten too deep to turn back. They've gone way too deep. The United States has even said that they really don't accept anything less than Iran's full surrender. And even if you don't take that statement by U.S. officials at face value, clearly the force deployments show otherwise. It looks like we are indeed preparing for war. And right now we're spending probably billions of dollars in logistical movements to get this equipment over there to Europe and move it on to the Middle East. So I personally don't think we'd be doing that unless we were ready to go in and hammer that regime. And right now, Israel is winning. Even though Israel's getting hammered a bit themselves, Israel is still winning. So the West has the upper hand here. And I think that they're looking to have a regime change. And that's why Europe's already discussing a replacement for Khameini, because they are believing that regime change is the likely outcome. So at this point, there's really no reason for the United States and the West to back off. It's time to really decapitate the snake. And I think they're going for that. And I think Iran's going to stay the course as well, because they know it's inevitable at this point. So I'm with the 68%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that I'm also with the 68%. I believe that the Iranians are going to remain on course with this. It appears that the Iranians are not open to any form of negotiations at this point, and are making it clear on an official level that they are not even going to entertain an idea of talks with the United States to even see if they would find common ground at this point with the U.S. ultimatum that's now been issued. It's also become incredibly clear that the United States States will not be sending the special envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, to have the 6th round of talks with the Iranians, because we are now not issuing diplomatic talk requests. We are now issuing ultimatums to the Iranians and saying they will either comply with these specific demands that the United States has made, otherwise they will suffer dearly the wrath of the United States of America. And so I do believe that it's incredibly clear at this point that both sides have hardened their positions on the subject, and we'll mostly be seeing a direct U.S. military involvement within days or weeks from this point. We actually have a feeling that it may actually be this weekend. That's just a feeling. It's probably not even going to end up being true, but it seems as though it most likely would be this weekend because the stock markets are closing, and at least for U.S. Political concerns, whenever any president of any party would be making those kinds of decisions, they usually wait for the stock markets to close so that way they can go and conduct their actions, and there isn't the absolute panic that starts as a result of something like this. So that appears to be the case at the moment. We'll have to wait and see, but it also could happen on next weekend, once again when the stock market closes, so that way the United States can kick it off when their forces are ready. At least considering that there's enough forces in Europe and the Middle East at this moment, that the United States certainly could start an offensive operation against Iran and also defend itself appropriately with its ground air defense forces, as well as its defensive and offensive air defense forces. It is highly likely that they may actually begin this operation possibly this weekend. But once again,
I think you're right. I think this weekend probably is what they're shooting for. Now, we could be wrong. We're just sort of guesstimating here. So if we try not to be wrong, we're not saying for a fact it's going to happen this weekend. But the current statements by the United States administration is that the moment they detect the negotiations are over and Iran's not willing to talk, then that's the moment they're going to take action. And I think at this point, it's pretty obvious that Iran's not talking. The talks in Geneva ended. They are not willing to talk to Europe. They're not willing to talk to the United States. Iran's not willing to talk to anybody unless you're talking to China or Russia to get more supplies. So I think the writing's on the wall at this moment. And also the huge troop movements, like I just went into detail a moment ago, the writing truly is on the wall. And I think Iran knows that, and they're trying to get ready basically for the worst. And I think that's why you're seeing the Iranian foreign minister head to Russia actually on Monday. He's trying to secure some type of support because he knows what's coming, and he's trying to get other people on board because they know that Iran can't stand on its own 2 feet against the United States, and they're hoping to drag somebody else in. And unfortunately, I'm not really sure if they can or not. That's a little bit of an unknown right now.
And it does appear that at the moment the Iranians are trying to travel around and figure out how to set themselves up some sort of support or help from some sort of an outside country, considering that the Israelis are already giving them a pretty good shellacking, as we've been able to see today. And moving us into that piece of news, inside the Islamic Republic of Iran, the Israeli Air Force has been publishing footage and information that is showing that they are absolutely hammering specifically Iranian air defense forces throughout the country. We were able to get significant amounts of footage that were compiled from all over the Islamic Republic of Iran, showing them destroying a multitude of different kinds of Iranian air defense systems, practically of every single variety. We were able to see at the beginning of the clip here an Israeli Delilah missile. I guess you could say, hey there, Delilah, what's it like in Tehran, Iran, or something like that. But we could see them hitting one of the air defense systems there. We can also see them hitting another air defense system here as well. This appears to be some sort of possibly a Tor M1 air defense system. It's a little bit hard to say because the footage is so grainy on these cruise missiles. And also, by the way, I forgot to mention, folks, this is actually the camera on the cruise missiles that is filming this footage. That's why the footage is so grainy. It's generally a one-time use camera, so why make it 4K Ultra HD? But we can see here that they are hitting and destroying a Tor M1 clearly on this picture. We can now see them destroying what appears to be a possible Hawk SAM system, and we can also then see them destroying another system as well. We also were able to get additional clips showing them destroying a radar site. This appears to actually be a Russian-provided radar site, at least from the design that we can tell at the moment, but we can see them targeting and destroying the actual command module and generator system for that air defense radar. We can also see them targeting other modules of the air defense system as well in these clips. It's a little bit wild to see that the Israelis are actually publishing the raw cruise missile camera footage, because this is something that you rarely would ever see most of the time. But that's the end of that.
It's a universal constant, though, at this point. Pretty much all the Russian equipment in Ukraine and in the Middle East is getting smashed every single day. It's not really, nobody's really discriminating against that equipment. It seems to get smashed by everybody.
It seems to get blown up by just about everyone. The key of the story, folks, is that Russian equipment is not that great, and apparently the radars don't really work too well. But we also got to see that the Israelis did target and destroy a missile launcher as well today, as the Israeli Air Force has been conducting an endless campaign, pretty much over 24 hours, to be able to try and find and destroy any Iranian ballistic missile transport erector launchers that they can find, otherwise known as the TEL by most people. We can see one of these launchers here being targeted and hit by an Israeli airstrike, and we can see the bright white flash and the large smoke cloud afterwards, showing that the airstrike not only hit the truck and destroyed it, but most likely hit the missile, igniting the propellant and possibly the warhead as well, all in one go, and sending the truck sky high, once again clearly destroying it. Outside of that footage, we also were able to see that air defense systems appear to have been destroyed around the significant city of LAvizan, as we were able to see smoke plumes rising from air defense within this area of southeastern Iran. And it's once again showing us that, at least for today, it has been a dark day for the Iranian air defense networks and systems of the Iranian army, because it appears that a large volume of them were destroyed practically without a fight. We were not even able to confirm any missile-based air defense activity from the Iranians. And as a matter of fact, for an interesting note, we have hardly been able to confirm at all, through video or picture evidence, any missile-based air defense activity throughout the Islamic Republic of Iran over the past 9 days that this action has been going on. That is something a little bit interesting to note, because if you ever go and look at the publicly listed information of Iranian air defense systems, you'll actually see that they have a large amount of missile-based interceptors and air defense systems in their inventory. But yet, over this entire offensive, we've never seen any of them actually used. We've only seen them getting destroyed by the Israelis. And it's leading me to believe that there might be a little bit of an ongoing idea, at least in my head, that the Iranians were never properly trained how to use the systems, because we have never seen them used so far, and actually firing any sort of ordnance. So it appears that at the moment, pretty much the only air defense that the Iranians have is gun-based air defense systems that are guided by the human eye, which in the modern warfare age means that they have no air defense. Outside of that, we have also been able to hear of ongoing airstrikes in Shiraz by the Israelis as well. We were able to see pretty much the red sun rising over one of the mountains to the east of the city, as it does appear that more air defense was also hit in Shiraz earlier in the day. We also even heard of air defense firing at Bushehr, which is suggesting that the Israelis did fire an airstrike near to the Bushehr city area. And just to note this for all of y'all, Bushehr is the only area inside the Islamic Republic of Iran where Russian Federation citizens or operators are currently based at the moment, as they are helping to construct the second reactor housing at the Bushehr nuclear power plant. So it does appear that while the Israelis told Putin the other day that the Russian citizens in Bushehr would never be under any threat of an air attack, it actually appears that they did come under the threat of an air attack today, and possibly may have even tried to target and destroy facilities within the city of Bushehr, although we were not able to get any video or picture evidence to be able to corroborate that later. We also were able to hear inside the area of Isfahan that there was more air defense firing within the area, but we were not able to hear or see of any airstrikes that were conducted in that area at a later date. However, the Israelis did land a very significant hit at the Internal Security Service inside of Tehran, as multiple command posts throughout the campus of the Iranian Internal Security Forces headquarters were targeted and destroyed, as we could see in this infographic here, published by the Israeli Defense Forces. It does appear that the Israelis are continuing to go after, target, and destroy centralized security services and domestic security forces throughout the entirety of Iran, along with Iran's air defense, as it appears that they are attempting to weaken the Iranian government, both by its ability to protect itself from the air, and also its ability to protect itself from uprisings or rebellions on the ground throughout the entirety of the country. We also were able to hear that the Iranian foreign minister is going to be traveling to the Russian Federation on Monday to talk with Putin, mostly to try and see if the Russians will back up the Iranians and protect them from the U.S. shellacking that's most likely coming around this weekend. Outside of that, we also got to hear, in unfortunate news, just to follow up on the story with everyone, it does appear that while there was an airstrike on the LAvizan neighborhood last night, and it hit incredibly close to Khameini's bunker, we were able to confirm that Khameini was not killed. He has survived. It doesn't appear that the Israeli airstrike was either able to punch through the bunker's protective layer or destroy the entrance, so it does appear that Khameini is still alive at the moment. However, we were able to hear that last night's airstrike has apparently rattled Khameini significantly, majorly so, as we've been able to hear that Khameini is now going practically radio silent, according to a CBS report. Khameini is fearful of communicating, concerned that Israel will intercept any signals and use it to target him. So it does appear that last night's airstrike came incredibly close to actually killing Khameini, and now Khameini is actually scared that any kind of radio communications or any kind of signals made whatsoever from his location that would give away that it's him will actually lead the Israelis to target it and kill him again, or attempt to kill him. He hasn't been killed yet.
What is he doing? Just like jumping on the radio and speaking to troops, or like what do they mean? Like he's fearful of communicating?
I believe that they're talking about he's fearful of communicating to the top commanders that are left, because he's pretty much stationary inside of his bunker at this point. And he actually may have moved as well at this point, considering that the airstrike came close to killing him last night. That he may have actually hopped out of that bunker and may be on the move today. But now that he's moving to a new location, he is pretty much going absolutely silent, meaning that we cannot really confirm that he's still in the LAvizan bunker at this moment on the channel. And it also suggests that he may be on the move. But what we are understanding is that he was inside of the bunker and he was using some form of a radio, or he had some sort of clerical staff with him, and they were using a radio to be able to communicate to his top commanders and allow him to continue to issue orders to his top commanders while remaining in the safety of the bunker. But it appears that that will now no longer be possible.
Yeah, does he really think that Israel doesn't have people that probably like are telling information that are snitching probably in his inner circle? I would imagine that most of the intelligence that Israel probably gets is not based on the smoke signals that he's sending out from his bunker. It's probably from the people snitching that's around him or knows about the government whereabouts of some way, because you got to know that a lot of people in the Iranian government, they probably know where Khameini is. And there's somebody in there. It's probably a double agent or an informant or something that's passing information, because I would imagine that just the radio signals alone is probably not just enough to find Khameini. They probably need a little bit more than that to confirm it.
They probably might need a little bit more to confirm it, but it most likely is the fact that he's going to be operating off of a runner system at this point, where he will be sending out runners inside of trucks or vehicles to be able to go to the other commanders' locations and then issue them orders. If the Israelis can figure out where the runners are and what they're doing and what orders they're issuing, they might be able to intercept these runners and kill off a couple of them, and they also might be able to use these runners to figure out where these other top Iranian commanders are, or where Khomeini's hiding place is actually wound up, if they're able to even get a beat on who the runners for the messages are. Because considering the fact that at least now, according to Israeli intelligence, he is now not using any radio communication or any kind of telecommunications whatsoever, it appears that he's most likely going to be using runners instead from this point on and going old school. This also means that his commands are going to be having a large amount of lag time from the time that they're issued to the time that are actually executed or followed on by his commanders, considering that depending on his distance from Tehran, or wherever the distance of his commanders are to him around the area of Tehran or even outside of Tehran, it is going to take hours or multiple days even to get a runner from one position to the other across the country. So it is highly likely that this will start to degrade the command abilities of the central Iranian government, or at least the top leadership, and a lot of these higher-ups will have to start to get a little bit of autonomy here in the future, and that might also give them a little bit of a taste for power and possibly lead to a destabilization of the Iranian government. But all of that at the moment is just
I tell you what, I wouldn't want the job. I wouldn't want the job of being Khomeini's runner, because I imagine that somebody's going to be looking out for those runners who are running the messages somewhere, and those runners might find themselves maybe in a van or something like that. I have a feeling, because I have a feeling they're probably going to be watched heavily by Mossad or some spy agency out there that's probably going to want to speak to them pretty promptly.
Oh yeah, I would bet you money that they're going to be trying to find him. But I would also say that considering that that's now happened, this doesn't almost sound like it actually does sound like the death of a regime in the making. Because whenever a leader starts to go into hiding like this and they start to get scared of getting on radios, this is going the way of Saddam's government in the invasion of Iraq in 2003, where Saddam Hussein just disappeared one day and nobody was able to find him. And that's because he went into hiding. And funnily enough, folks, one thing that's actually a little bit interesting is that he actually went into the hiding in the city of Tikrit. He was actually hiding in someone's backyard in the city, if I remember correctly, in a small little hole. And he had a little fan down there, and I think a couple of other things. But he literally just lived in that hole for months until the U.S. found him. But beyond that, it sounds like Khameini might be going in that direction as well, and might end up hiding in a hole in someone's backyard disappeared for a couple of months until someone finds him, possibly. But outside of that, a very interesting development in the Iranian government. Beyond that, however, we have been able to hear that the Islamic Republic of Iran was continuing to fire ballistic missiles at the state of Israel, and we were able to get video and picture evidence confirming the flight of these missiles over Israel, and also their unfortunate impacts inside of Israel when the air defense interceptors were not able to shoot down a large enough number of them. And so here's the footage. This is actually filmed from the West Bank in Palestine. That's the end of that clip, but we also have a second clip here, once again showing us the inbound Iranian ballistic missiles. We can confirm at this point that the Iranians are using the Khorram-Shabir. We have been able to see enough proof on the ground, at least in terms of debris and also videos of the Iranians launching their missiles, that Khorram-Shabirs are being fired, which is one of Iran's newest missiles. It also, just to explain the shape of it to all of y'all, because I don't have enough time to show it on stream tonight, it pretty much looks like a Crayola crayon. That's its literal basic shape. But outside of that, we were able to see over Tel Aviv the skies of Israel during the interceptions. We could see that right there. And then we were also able to hear throughout other attacks in the course of the day, the air raid sirens were once again going off over the entirety of Tel Aviv, and we also were able to see the interceptions and unfortunate hits that were occurring throughout the night. I won't be able to show this clip, however, due to it having some copyrights, but we were able to see throughout the clip some flashes in the distance and the sound of impacts as some Iranian missiles were able to hit. Outside of that, we also get to see some air defense interceptions going on in northern Israel. Interestingly enough, a very cool clip here. We actually got to see an Israeli F-16 in visual sight targeting and destroying an Iranian Shahed long-range kamikaze drone with most likely an AIM-9 air-to-air missile over the northern area near to Haifa. Here's the clip. It's actually an incredibly interesting one and incredibly rare so far, showing the Israeli Air Force actually involved in the air defense. There's the F-16. We see it popping flares and also firing off its missile. And we can see the drone going down right there. Very rare footage, mind you all, and it's actually incredibly interesting to see that the, actually, one second, folks, we got to break for a moment, because we actually have breaking news coming out at this moment. So, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so we do have some breaking news happening right this second. Apparently, the Iranian foreign minister has informed the United States officially and formally that zero enrichment is not feasible, and they're not willing to negotiate on that whatsoever. So that is the first direct statement we've heard since the ultimatum was issued by the United States to Iran, that they'll either back down or else, or there will be an intervention for certain. So right now we are hearing from the Iranian foreign minister himself. He's personally delivered a message to Witkoff, who's the Middle East negotiator, that he will not be negotiating on enrichment whatsoever. So that right there, if the United States officials are speaking truthfully on this, that was the green light, the big go signal for the attack on Iran. So from this point forward, technically, based on what they said, we should see an imminent attack coming up here within days or maybe even weeks. We're really not sure right this second, but apparently, though, they have said that formally. So, Enforcer, what say you?
So we are now able to hear, at least at this very moment, that the Iranians have responded to the ultimatum and have already denied one of the most crucial demands in the ultimatum at this moment. So, once again, there's not really a lot of surprise there, but we will be seeing at this point that either the United States has to react militarily or that we don't. Those are the only two options that the United States has left. If we do not react militarily, it is going to show the United States as a weak country. If we react militarily, that's really our only choice or option left. They either could accept the ultimatum or they could refuse it and then face the consequences. So at this point, they're going to have to face the consequences, at least according to their answer at the moment. And this is also going to be leading us into a little bit more breaking news as well that just came out. What do we got, Matthew?
So we have just learned right this moment that the United States president will be attending the national security meeting tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern time, and that was just announced right now. So the president will be at the national security meeting. So that was just announced, like I mentioned. So that indicates that could be in response to the message that was just delivered by the Iranian foreign minister. And maybe we're seeing the green light, or the meeting that will require the green light for the attack on Iran. We're not really sure because, of course, we don't know the contents of these meetings, and the press is not allowed to attend this national national security meeting. So we'll be watching tomorrow to see if maybe the green light is given, because this would be right smack dab in the middle of the weekend when we suspect that the attack might start. So also pretty big news.
And it does appear that this is significant news, and it already appears that the U.S. government is getting the hamsters running in the wheels to be able to get the whole thing turning and burning, hopefully soon. So it does appear that there's already been an immediate knee-jerk response to the Iranian refusal, and we're now seeing that a National Security Council is going to be convened at 6 p.m. in the afternoon tomorrow, which, interestingly enough, folks, I do have to remind you all, that is still the nighttime hours in Iran. So if that was the issuance of a green light that will be made in that National Security Council right there, it actually will be made at the very moment that the U.S. Air Forces could strike in the darkness of the night against the Iranians, which usually falls within the exact kind of modus operandi that Air Forces like to operate in. So we'll possibly see the U.S. military action either begins on that day, at that very hour, or might begin the next day on Sunday. We're not entirely sure yet. We'll have to wait and see. But beyond that, a very interesting development nonetheless. Also, outside of that, we do have a lot of people talking about this at the moment. When is the United States going to attack? Are they going to attack at all? And Matthew, what are people talking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
All right. So on top of everything else happening, we've also gotten word that the USS Nimitz Carrier Strike Group will be arriving this weekend inside or of Israel, at least near Israel, not in Israel. Obviously, it's a ship, so it's not going to suddenly grow legs and walk on the land. It's going to stay in the water, but it is arriving very soon in the Middle East. And the big question is, will the United States attack Iran then when this Carrier Strike Group is officially in place? So 47% said yes, the USA will attack this weekend, while 23% said no, the U.S. will attack within weeks. And 12% said the U.S. will never go to war with Iran, and it's merely a bluff that will never be carried through. And honestly, I'm not guaranteeing this. So because if it happens differently, I just want to make that clear. This is not a guarantee. This is my guesstimate. I believe that most likely the U.S. might attack this weekend. That's my current hunch right now. But of course, we could be wrong because we're simply going off our gut instincts here and what we think. So I'm with the 47%. I think we could see something happening by late this weekend, or maybe even late tomorrow, perhaps. So maybe by Sunday evening or sometime around that point. It could be later, but I think it might be this weekend. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that I would be fairly certain. And once again, folks, I want to say I'm fairly certain. It's not a definitive answer. It's not a guarantee that I'm giving y'all here. But I'm fairly certain that there's going to be an attack over this weekend. The stock markets are closed over the weekend. It's the perfect time to do something because everyone panics and then stops panicking before the stock market opens. So there is no major hit to the stock market, which is a very big thing for the U.S. government. And to explain that really quickly, because I saw some people wanting to say that we don't know how the stock market works. And I know that a lot of people already know that if a stock market crash happens, that's a pretty good time to buy stocks because that's when you're going to get them at the lowest price. I think you can pretty much ride the wave right back up. But for the U.S. government, on the other hand, that doesn't work that way for them. They want to keep the stock market up high. If the stock market crashes, that reflects badly on the political party that holds the majority. And right now, the current political party that's in, just like the other political party, if they were also in at the moment, wants to make sure that they mitigate any kind of economic fallout from any kind of military actions that would happen overseas. And so if the United States was to approve military action over the weekdays in the middle of the stock market's open operating hours, that means that there would be a panic. People panic at literally the sight of everything in the stock market. You could say that the president just tripped and fell on the stairs to Air Force One, and there's going to be a dip in the stock market. It just happens. So the United States wants to make sure that when people panic, like generally some of the people are like the cattle who pretty much just panic at the sight of a storm or the flash of lightning, they want to make sure that they do that while they don't have the ability to start dumping stocks and start causing a possible crash in the stock market. So if any actions happen, it's going to be happening over the weekend. Because I just want to make this a little bit clear to all of y'all how it kind of works on the mechanical perspective of politics. If there was a stock market crash because of this action, there are going to be a lot of people, specifically these people who control things called super PACs and lobbying organizations, that are going to be very displeased with the current president and the current political party that holds the majority. And that might start to sway them in the upcoming midterm elections and the future presidential elections to start putting their money and their chips behind the other people and other political parties, which doesn't end up turning out well in a long-term political perspective. And for that reason, that's usually why both parties like to conduct any kind of drastic actions on the weekend weekends, so that way no one can freak out and start dumping stocks and pretty much causing an unending economic chaos because of an action that was inevitable and had to be made, and in reality might not have any impact at all on the U.S. economy, or even more still, may have a very positive impact on the U.S. economy because of the increased government spending as a result of this sort of action. But that's generally how it works. But beyond that, that's why we most likely would believe that it would be happening over the weekend. If it doesn't happen this weekend, I would think that it would probably happen the weekend after this. But I'm feeling a little bit certain that it's probably going to happen this weekend and not the next one. So I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion at the moment, because it is generally a bit of a pressing topic at the moment. When is the U.S. going to respond? I have a feeling we're guaranteed going to see a response, maybe this weekend. But with that, we are going to be moving on into the rest of the news that we also have out of the state of Israel, as we also were able to hear in the meantime that there were hits inside the city of Haifa earlier in the day. We were able to see that an Iranian ballistic missile appears to have hit just right outside of the port of Haifa. We can actually geolocate the specific area that this hit was made. If we zoom in here, we can actually find one of the larger harbor buildings because this was right next to the water line, and we can also see a larger wharf out there along with a breakwater. If we were to look for all of those things, that actually lines up with the hit being somewhere around right here, right around this highway area right there. So that seems to be the general area where this hit was recorded, at least at the moment, which was once again incredibly close to the port, possibly suggesting that the Iranians are now attempting to target and destroy the intermodal cranes, which are vital to the operation of this significant port, which makes up half of the maritime traffic and cargo that the Israelis receive annually outside the port of Ashdod, which is also the other significant port and only other significant port capable of accepting intermodal traffic in the entirety of the state of Israel. We also were able to see a clip showing us the damage on the ground right here. And we also were able to see additional footage showing us right here.
يا جماعة طبش كل الجامع طبش كل الجامع الجامع اتطحن اتطحن الشبابيك اتكسروا طلعوا الشبابيك طلعوا كل الشبابيك اتطحنت اللي الله بحبكم ما حداش كان هون ابوي كان هون تعور راجي.
And interestingly enough, the Iranians actually ended up hitting a mosque with the missile, or at least the mosque was moderately damaged due to the impact of the missile. So while generally the Iranians have been trying to target the evil Zionist regime, at least according to their claims, they actually ended up hitting a mosque of the same faith that they are a part of as well, which is a little bit ironic, considering the fact that they are claiming that anyone who's Islamic inside of Israel is not their target, and they're actually a part of the blessed peoples of Iran as well for the general part. Although, once again, that's really just more so of a propaganda point, because Iran hates every single sect of Islam that is not the Iranian sect of Islam. So, once again, that doesn't really hold up to scrutiny even beyond that point. We also were able to see that the Israelis did shoot down a drone over the area of Haifa overnight as well, which we could see in this clip.
That was a very quiet shoot down. It was like quiet as a mouse.
Yeah, the quietest. It happened about 10 miles away, so I guess the sound is very faint from this distance of the drone shooting down. But it literally, man, that was so quiet, most people probably slept through that drone interception outside of the air raid sirens that went off. No one probably woke up for that because you couldn't even really hear it. But outside of that, moving on out of that clip, we've also been able to hear that U.S. Navy destroyers are now off the coast of Israel at the moment and are positioned close enough to Israel to intercept incoming missiles, according to U.S. defense officials stating that information to the Wall Street Journal. We already did know that there were some Arleigh Burke-class destroyers in the Eastern Mediterranean when the hostilities broke out, so those destroyers have most likely made it on site at this very time of day to be able to create an air defense shield. These destroyers are guaranteed to be Arleigh Burke-class destroyers. The Arleigh Burke-class destroyer is pretty much the universal destroyer of the modern American Navy in this present day and time. Here's actually a picture of the USS Roosevelt, a DDG-80, one of our early Berg class destroyers, but this picture was taken quite a long time ago, at least by the quality of it. And early Berg class destroyers have actually come a long way since their original introduction into the U.S. Navy back in 1991. The modern day Arleigh Burke class destroyers, such as this one right here, this picture was most likely taken in 2018, are incredibly potent. They are able to carry a wide variety of missiles and air defense systems that not only protect the vessel, but can protect a fleet-wide operation over the distance of hundreds of miles, because this ship is customized specifically, at least the modern refits of the Arleigh to carry some of the best air defense missiles that actually exist in the world. And let me show you one of those. It would be, let's see here, here we are, the RIM 161 SM-3. This missile right here. You wouldn't believe it looking at this picture, but this missile is actually about the height of about a 3-story or 4-story building. These things are huge, and they have quite the range. This is a large caliber air defense interceptor. Most modern warships are actually, funnily enough, hardly made to engage and destroy other warships. Most of their armament is actually air defense. Generally, at least for naval doctrine, both missile cruisers and destroyers are pretty much designed in the modern day to be giant floating air defense batteries. Everything else is generally secondary. The only reason why the Navy has a 127mm main gun on board the Arleigh Burke, believe it or not, is generally for air defense. It's not an anti-ship gun, it's generally an anti-aircraft gun. And this gun here can actually carry a large amount of flak shells, 127mm shrapnel airburst rounds, that are able to detonate at any given range within the gun's distance, which can fire out to, I believe, about 12 miles. So quite a considerable range even for the gun in an air defense scenario. The Arleigh Burkes also have, believe, 1 or 2 CIWS phalanx systems on board, which are close in missile defense systems, which are pretty much the last line of defense. But the first and primary line of defense are those SM-3 missiles. They're incredibly expensive, but they've got a kick to them. These missiles can actually reach out to about a 1,000-mile range from the vessel and destroy any targets within that 1,000 to 750-mile range. It is impressive. As a matter of fact, these Arleigh Burke destroyers, at least stationed or anchored off the coast of Israel, would be able to fire all the way into Iran. So once a ballistic missile launch is detected, these Arleigh Burke destroyers are actually able to fire off their missiles pretty much instantaneously and probably shoot down a significant number of them while they're still flying over Iraq before they even make it into Syrian or Jordanian airspace, or even close enough to Israeli airspace for the Israelis to actually start to respond to the incoming threats. So quite a significant bit of firepower. If there are 2 Arleigh Burkes in this area, we can assume that they could have a very large amount of these missiles in the area, because they are able to carry inside their vertical launch cells around approximately, let's see here, I want to make sure that I get this correct. Let's see here. Yeah, so about 100 of these missiles or so. So it's not a small number. It's actually quite an impressive volume of fire that these things can lay out. And you can actually see them firing off some of them here in a test exercise back in the late 90s and early 2000s. A very impressive vessel. The Ticonderoga is even more impressive in terms of firepower, but our average Arleigh Burke class destroyer is quite formidable, at least for the Iranians to try and get through its air defense perimeter. But outside of that, we are able to hear that there is now a massive air defense shield right next to Israel in the form of these Arleigh Burke class destroyers, and we'll be seeing how much they add into the air defense here in the coming days. Outside of that, though, we have also been able to hear of even further ongoing developments outside of Europe and inside of the People's Republic of China, interestingly enough. We are at least hearing right now, the Chinese Foreign Ministry could change their opinion on this, but it does appear that the Chinese may have no strategic concern to actually come to the Iranians' aid in the immediate future, at least according to information that we have right now from Nexta and Bloomberg reports. According to the country's refineries in China, the largest consumers of Iran's crude oil, they are now unconcerned about potential supply disruptions from the Middle East. And according to Karios, a company specializing in oil reserve monitoring, the total volume of oil stored in China has reached a historic high of 1.18 billion barrels, meaning that China's oil refineries could actually operate for several years, almost self-sustaining, without any need for foreign imports of any kind of crude oil or petroleum. This means that China's energy stability is pretty much secured, at least for the moment, and the Chinese will not have to respond rapidly or at all, at least for now, on any situation that's happening inside of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Largely meaning that for now, the People's Republic of China, at least in their decision-making processes, will consider an intervention in support of Iran to not only be risky, but pointless given their energy infrastructure and energy stability situation inside of the country, although there's also a lot of other domestic issues that would play into that decision making as well, that would make it a unwise idea for the People's Republic of China to join in the support of Iran. They have a lot to lose and not necessarily anything to gain from that sort of an action at the moment. Kind of like the Russians. And speaking of which, that's actually about to move us right up into the Ukraine war segment, because we have a lot of news and information to cover up here as well. But before we get into that, I do want to talk a little bit about what's going to be going on here in the near future with specifically the Russians. The Russians actually stated that Russian scientists are in the area of the Bushehr nuclear power plant, and considering that there was air defense fire in that area, a lot of people have been talking about the Russians' involvement in Iran and what it's really chalking up to at this moment. And so, Matthew, what are people thinking about it, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right. So Putin did state today that he refuses to evacuate the Russian nuclear scientists from the Bushehr nuclear power plant inside of Iran, which is, of course, a very critical nuclear site for the Iranian regime. And why is Putin doing that? Because it would seem to be the logical thing to do would be to get your guys out of harm's way. But it seems like Putin is leaving them in harm's way for some unknown reason. But about 61% of the audience said he's shielding Iran's nuclear facility using his very own nuclear scientists, while 24% said he wants a justification to enter the war, and 9% said it seems to be largely senseless and probably just Russian stupidity. And honestly, I would say I'm with the 61%. I think Putin is using his own Russian nuclear scientists to create a de facto shield around the Bushehr plant because he knows that Israel will be very hesitant to strike it because they don't want to hurt the Russian scientists, because that could anger Putin and cause Russia to get involved in the war against Israel. So even though Russia doesn't have a very good capability to do that at the very moment, there is still a possibility that they could lash out with something or supply more aid to Iran, and Israel does not want that. So I think, generally speaking, I think the Israelis might end up hitting it anyway, maybe in a limited way, but the Russian nuclear scientists will be a bit of a choke point with the attack on that facility if it does ever happen. So I think Putin's doing it on purpose, and it's pretty clearly motivated by Russian interest. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that the Russians are most likely trying to shield nuclear facilities, although I also will say that the Israelis will most likely never strike or destroy the Bushehr nuclear power plant. It also appears that the Russians are trying to keep Russians in the line of danger to pretty much have a casus belli if they want to join in the future or create a major diplomatic scenario, which I would have to say that in this situation should be ignored. If the Russians didn't want their people in the line of danger, they shouldn't have been in Iran, simply put. That's how the United States should respond to any Russian attempts to create a major international diplomatic scenario out of this situation, but it does appear that Putin is attempting to shield Iran's nuclear facility, at least in Bushehr at the moment, and also try and create some sort of a plausible scenario where the Russians could get enraged and attempt to respond or say or threaten that they would respond to an ongoing situation in Iran. But once again, there are a lot of limiting factors. The Russians, for one, don't really have a significant enough military to really follow through with anything. That's become incredibly clear in Ukraine. Secondly, the Russians are also poor, and I do not say that as an insult to the Russians, although they ought to take it as one. I say that for the fact that they can hardly afford to fight the war in Ukraine. They can try to afford a war against the United States, but no one spends tax dollars better than the U.S. government on military equipment. So they'd be pretty hard-pressed to be able to beat us in the spending war, and if it came down to that, that is a losing war altogether for really anyone in the world at the moment, because the United States spends more than the next 7 largest military powers combined, and still we have a decent amount of wiggle room beyond that. So with that in mind, I generally have to say the Russians would be hard-pressed, even with this diplomatic justification to possibly get involved or create a diplomatic situation in the future, to do anything about it. But with that, I hope that has addressed it the best I can, at least in my opinion. And with that, it is actually time for us to move on into the area of the state of Ukraine and the ongoing Ukraine war, which we have not really been able to give a lot of consistent coverage over the past few days. And once again, I do apologize to our folks here who generally are here for Ukraine war news because of the massive developing situation in the Middle East. I hope many people have understood this is a world news channel, and we try and cover everything we can around the world. But sometimes things like the Middle East are so pressing, we pretty much have to cover it only, because it takes all of our focus and attention to be able to make sure to keep up with all of the rapid ongoing developments and also make sure that we cover all of them as they're coming out. But there's still been some decent developments in Ukraine today, at least on a defensive level, and we have been able to see the Ukrainians have been able to hold their front lines again in most fronts, although the Russians still are making incredibly slow and costly gains within the Zaporizhia plain. But beyond that, we are going to be grabbing a couple of questions before we move on into the news in Ukraine. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so our first super chat question of the night goes to a channel legend. It is BC Skyman, the original channel legend, and thank you very much, BC, for that very generous $80 support right there. And he did leave some super stickers behind, apparently of the YouTube creature jumping around the town and destroying it, kind of like the Israelis are doing in Iran right now. It looks like they're waving a yellow flag for caution, but I don't think the Israelis are waving that flag. I think they're coming in with no warning sometimes, giving them the shellacking. But thank you very much, BC, for that support. And Enforcer, what say you?
I got to thank you for the massive support, BC Skyman. You didn't throw in a comment on that super chat, but we always know that you have incredibly nice things to say about the channel. And I got to thank you so much once again for the support and always helping this channel to keep on running, because folks like you have made this channel a reality for years now and have made it a reality for us to be able to cover literally everything around the world. This channel has pretty much gone through the smorgasbord at this point of conflicts. We covered the Sudanese Civil War for its first day, and then that was such a confusing conflict. A lot of people hated it, and we never covered it again. And honestly, it was pretty much impossible for us to even figure out what was going on down there because no one had any uniforms on, so we couldn't even tell who was who. It's just, literally, it's just endless firefights in the streets of Khartoum, so we didn't know what was going on either. But we also got to cover the India-Pakistan border war that happened for about a week. We also got to cover the ongoing escalations between South Korea and North Korea for about the month that was going on, I believe way earlier on in this year. We also have been able to cover the ongoing situation between China and Taiwan and the U.S. island defense chain within the area. We've also been able to cover everything that's happened in the Middle East since October 7th of 2023, and we've also been able to cover everything pretty much happening in Eastern Europe and Europe generally, at least as far as war pertains. I've got to say, if it wasn't for folks like you, BC Skyman, we would have never been around for that many years to be able to cover all of this news. I've got to thank you so much once again for the support, and I got to thank you for being an integral member of the Elise Spring Army, our channel community, for those who might be new to the channel and wondering what the LSA is. And I got to thank you so much for being here with us again tonight. So a massive thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat here is going to go to Howard Mendelson, who puts in a very generous $50 donation, and thank you very much, Howard, as well, for that support. And he said, I'll answer the poll in the next 2 weeks. You can't do that, Howard. That's a cop-out right there. Honestly, I would love to answer the poll in 2 weeks, too, because at that point, we should have a clear answer. If something hasn't happened in 2 weeks, then we'll probably never attack Iran. And also, that would be a hell of an embarrassment for the United States because we moved so much assets into the region and made so many big threats, and then to simply walk away after 2 weeks and let Iran do whatever they want, that would be very bad precedent to set, probably the worst precedent we've ever set. But I would say, I would hope to answer the poll then too. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to agree. It's a cop-out, but I respect it because really that's when we'll get the answer, is probably within 2 weeks or maybe even this weekend. But I do thank you massively for support and helping this channel to keep on running. I thank you for putting that in because I wish I could also answer it in about 2 weeks. But we have to answer things now on this channel because people want answers now, like they want news now. And I got to thank you for always wanting the news now, Howard, and helping this channel to keep running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we would have never been able to make this thing possible and keep it rolling to this day. So a massive thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this thing rolling. And so with that, we are going to be moving on to our final question of this segment. And also, folks, I got to say really quickly, just a little bit of a note. We generally have a rule on this channel about no partisan politics and also no religion as well. I've been seeing a decent amount of religious bots in the chat tonight saying, repent, your time is nigh. If we see that, I got to tell y'all, that's just against the channel rules. And also, I don't even know how that pertains to what we're doing here on this channel. This isn't Joel Osteen's channel. This is the Enforcer. So please, if you're doing that, keep it down to non-existent levels of chatter, because that generally is against channel rules. But beyond that, we are going to be moving on into our final question of this segment. And so what do we got, Matthew?
And this one goes to Danny B, another channel legend. And thank you, Danny, as well, for that $50 support and supporting the channel in a very big way. And it's good to see you. He said, "Good evening, Enforcers. Chef Danny here, and I'm listening at work and just want to show some love and thanks for all your work. And y'all are working almost as much as me. And thanks again, and LSA."
Hey, and I gotta say, Danny B, no one works as hard as the chef of the LSA. That I can guarantee. I gotta thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible and make this thing a reality. I gotta thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to hear of the absolutely bussin' eats that you cook up out there in Colorado. And not only that, we wouldn't be able to have an official chef of the Lee Spring Army. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are going to be moving on into the remainder of the news. Also, really quickly, let me address the people who want to go off on that. No, I'm a Christian, but I don't do the religious talk. Like, if you're a Christian, you should just be able to walk the walk without having to tell everyone you're a Christian. That's my belief. So if you're in here doing that, I'm not really a fan of that, because it's just trying to virtue signal. It's not really a big thing in my book. But outside of that, we are going to be moving on into the remainder of the news that we have inside of Eastern Europe, as we were able to hear opening up the conflict this morning that the Russian president of the Russian Federation has made some incredibly interesting statements, at least at the moment, that appear to be suggesting to us that the U.S. negotiating attempts will be going nowhere here in the future. We've been able to hear this statement, which was probably the most interesting one at this point. Allow me to let y'all hear it. I'm just going to let y'all hear him say it in his words with the subtitles below, translating his statements. It's a very concerning one, and once again is showing exactly what people have been saying for years. So let's listen to it.
Происходит логика, определенная логика боевых действий, и войска оказываются на разных территориях. Но, знаете, у нас есть такая старинная, ну, это не поговорка, не притча, а старинное правило. Там, где ступает нога русского солдата, то наша.
It's good that he's finally being honest for a change. That's a refreshing change, honestly. I'd rather just hear it straight up like that, even though it sounds obviously repulsive, like the ghoul he is. But I'd rather hear it straight like that.
But you know, something that's also a little bit interesting is that he said, and these are some things to put together here, folks, because it's making it quite clear to anyone who would want to deny this at this point. This is still the inevitable truth. He said it's an old rule, meaning that it's been around for a really, really long time. That whenever a Russian soldier sets foot on any soil, it's theirs. And this is once again leading exactly into the claims that many people have been saying, that Putin has been directly stating that Eastern Europe is still within his targets in the future. And Ukraine is just the start of it, but much like Hitler, the Anschluss of Austria and the annexation of the Sudetenland and Czechoslovakia isn't the end of it. There is still further ambitions to go even farther. And Putin wants to bring back pretty much the Russian equivalent of the Lebensraum concept that was pretty prevalent under Nazi ideology, which is called in Russia the Ruski Mir, which means Russian world. And what that is pretty much that the Russian Federation is able to reclaim the lost territories, not of the Soviet Union. A lot of people get this confused. They don't want the territory back of the Soviet Union. They want the territory back of the Russian Empire. So what they want to do is that they want to go and retake all of the Stan series countries, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Kazakhstan, and they also want to retake Ukraine, Belarus, the Baltic states, parts of Poland, and Finland. If you go and look at a map of the late Russian Empire, now let me go show y'all the map of the Russian Empire in 1910. Let's see here, where's a good one? That is quite literally exactly what the Russian Empire looked like in its final years. This is what the Russian Empire actually looked like at the opening of World War I. It had parts of Poland, parts of modern-day Poland under its control, the Baltic states, Belarus, Ukraine, Moldova, pretty much all of the Caucasus Mountain states, and also all of the Stan series countries as well. All of those were a part of the Russian Empire, as well as Finland. And it seems as though the Russians are continuously pushing forward, at least Putin is, that they want to bring back the Ruski Mir. And once again, notice, folks, he said it's an old rule that wherever Russian soldiers have stepped foot, it's theirs. So not only is it showing that they're wanting to bring back the Russian Empire, it's also showing that they want to bring back the Russian sphere of influence into its full form, or even further than they ever went in the past. And so, once again, clearly showing us that the Russians have ambitions that go much farther than Ukraine at the moment. Not only that, but he also made an additional statement as well, and here it is from here.
Сказали по поводу областей на Украине, которые мы считаем своими. Да, я уже много раз говорил, что считаю русский и украинский народ одним народом на самом деле. В этом смысле вся Украина наша.
And
That's
there was
funny how he treats his own people, isn't it? He treats the Ukrainians like they're disposable, like their lives don't matter, and he says they're all one people. It's kind of funny he says that.
Yeah, it's kind of funny he says that because he also treats the Russians as one disposable people as well, going up against another disposable group of people. But once again, making incredibly clear, I mean, like, you couldn't even make it more clear, this is literally coming out of the horse's mouth, that one, his ambitions do lie further than Ukraine, as in the prior statement laid out, and two, he also wants to take control of all of Ukraine, not just a part of it, he wants to take control of all of it eventually. So this is a total war that's going on to absolute victory inside of Ukraine. And he's publicly making these statements, which are also pretty much making it entirely clear that the United States, if we ever re-enter any kind of attempt at negotiations with the Russian Federation, or if the Ukrainians do, we are largely going into negotiations that are going to be insincere and conducted in bad faith. The Russians have no wish or want to end this war until they win. And that's being made incredibly clear by these statements. And not only that, if we lose in Ukraine, because this isn't just a Ukrainian war, this is our war at this point. If we lose in Ukraine, the Russians are going to be bringing the war into our backyard, into the Eastern European countries of the Baltics and Poland, without a fail, without any question. That will be happening at this point. So once again, this war is of a significant imperative. And I want to make sure to make that clear, because we have a lot of new viewers here, and this channel doesn't really work off of the partisan politic ideology here in America, where the war in Ukraine has value or it doesn't, while the other war in the Middle East either has value or it doesn't. On the flip side, we don't work on that kind of logic here. Supporting American interests around the globe is an endless effort and pretty much a prerogative of the United States and our sphere of influence. The United States survives with the kind of success and prosperity that we have today because we were able to create a strong and unified sphere of influence over the course of the past 70 years that not only has brought our neighbors in this alliance a great deal of economic wealth and prosperity, but has also brought the United States in turn that equal amount of even greater economic prosperity and good times that we've been able to see for those past 70 years or so. The fact of the matter is that the Russian Federation, the Islamic Republic of Iran, and the People's Republic of China are all working, either in concert or separately, to try and undermine our sphere of influence and eventually bring the kind of lifestyle that we've all come to enjoy here in the West, either in Europe, America, or elsewhere, to an inevitable end and bring that around to themselves. And that is something that I would never want to live to see the day of. And that is why, just to make it a little bit clear to everyone who's here with us right now, the war in Ukraine is as important as crushing the Iranians. We have to crush the Iranians and the Russians in concert. And it's even more clear that that's the case because if you support the United States taking military action or against Iran, or if you just support the Israeli actions alone against the Iranians, the Russians are already making it clear that while they're not in open support of Iran, they are in spiritual support of the Iranians, once again putting them all in the same group. So you really can be against the war in Ukraine and for the war in the Middle East at the same time. You pretty much have to be for both of them equally. This is pretty much the same fight happening in two different areas of the world right now against two different countries. And so with that, we are going to be moving on into the actual details of the news we did get out of Ukraine today, and we were able to hear that, once again, air interceptions were having to be conducted over the region last night, including that of an F-16 shooting down a Shahed. But before we get into that, we do hear, at least on a side note, I didn't include this tonight, that Putin is stating that the world is getting a little bit closer to World War III. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
All right. So, of course, Putin says all the time that World War is close, that nukes are going to be flying or something of that nature. He's constantly throwing around those threats, but this time it's a little bit different because now he's tying Iran into the situation as well. Putin says today that the world is drifting toward World War III rapidly and that Iran is fighting against the same forces that Russia is fighting against, clearly aligning Putin and Russia with this new axis of evil, which is the North Koreans, the Chinese, the Russians, and the Iranians, and probably some other countries mixed in, which are too small to mention. But it looks like, what are the audience thoughts on that question and this issue right now? So 47% said Putin is right, but Putin is the main cause of the reason why we're heading toward World War III. While 32% said World War III is not imminent, and 13% said he's right, but he's not the main cause. And honestly, Putin started it. He's the one who literally started this whole situation. He's the one who brought the world to the brink of World War III. And now Iran is also getting fired up. China's wanting to get fired up on Taiwan, but they're not really ready to pull the trigger just yet. But Putin was the catalyst for it all when he invaded Ukraine. If it weren't for that, the world would generally be still pretty much stable right now. But he destabilized the entire geopolitical order. And now, because of that, we're seeing all kinds of escalations all over the place. So I would say I'm with the 47%. He is right. The world is getting close to World War III, and he's the main cause. And now all of his cronies and buddies are jumping in with him. Now it's a big plan, and they're all in on it. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that the Russian Federation is one of the main causes of the instability and war we're seeing in the present day. They are threatening the very security of the largest economic alliance in the world right now, even next to the United States. The European Union accounts for around a 23 or 24 trillion dollar collective GDP. It is actually the second largest economic power on earth, only second to the United States of America. And considering that the EU and the United States are both a part of the exact same alliance, it is pressingly clear, and obviously so, that the Russian Federation is trying to push our alliance to the brink of war and is largely the one starting this. He is trying to encroach on our territory in the Baltics and in Poland to threaten our stability and our economic prosperity. That is incredibly clear. And not only that, but he has also largely led open the grounds, at least with his provocative and dangerous actions in Europe, for the Iranians to decide that they could take even further and provocative actions against the Israelis and openly state over the past few years that they are working towards the production of a usable nuclear weapon, which we've been hearing about on the channel for around a year or a year and a half at this point. It is pressingly so, and more so obvious, that yes, the world is getting closer to World War III at this point, but if anyone's to blame for it, it's not the United States because we're responding to all the fires that Iran and Russia and China are starting. It's because these countries are the ones starting the fires that we are having to fight right now. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, in my opinion. And speaking of the fires that we're having to put out, the Ukrainians actually put up a good one, a good fire in the skies today, as we were able to see an Ukrainian F-16 shooting down a Shahed. You can actually see that Shahed on the camera right there, and in a second it's about to get slammed by an AIM-9. And there it went. And there goes the F-16 right there.
Oh, dang. Thought I heard like an A-10 like brrr there for a minute.
I think it may have actually shot it down with a gun. I'm not sure. Let's listen to that again. I think it actually did shoot it down with the burst of the gun instead of an AIM-9. I think that's what we heard because the F-16 uses a M61 20mm rotary cannon. I'll show it to y'all outside of the plane. It actually uses this gun, which is pretty much a smaller version of the Gal-10 in a sense. They almost work off of the same principle. Here's another better picture of one. So you have the giant ammo belt drum. You just put that anywhere in the plane you want. It's in a different place in each plane. But you also put the gun right there inside of the side of the wing cowling. And let me go show you the M61 on an F-16. You can't really see it too well, but there is the gun port right there for the 20mm gun.
That's pretty cool. It sounds very, very reminiscent of the A-10's Gal gun. It sounds pretty close. It's obviously not super close, though, because I think, does this one shoot like so fast that the sound has to catch up like the A-10, or is it not the same?
Oh, yeah, it's about the same. It's just, it literally is almost the same gun, just a smaller caliber. So instead of it being a 30mm, it's a 20mm.
Oh, interesting. Well, that's pretty cool then. That explains exactly why we're hearing that.
Yeah, that's actually pretty neat. I actually didn't hear that the first go around the clip. I thought they shot it down with an AIM-9, but apparently they actually engaged it with the gun and shot it down that way, so that's pretty unique. Let me see if I can show you another picture here, because it's actually really interesting to look at this. This is actually, I believe, a German F-104, one of the later variants of the F-104, once again with a 20mm M61 inside. But you just take the gun, plop it into an internal compartment. There's usually a gun port further up at the front, and then the gun barrel drum, well, not the gun barrel drum, but the gun ammo drum is just placed in another empty void in the aircraft, and that's how the aircraft operates. You can actually access both panels as well, both for maintenance of the gun and reloading for the aircraft, but usually most pictures we see just show the gun, not the open ammo drum compartment. You can also see the 20 millimeter right here on the cowling, the wing cowling of an F-15, which is a lot more exposed than the F-16.
That is pretty cool. I gotta say, nothing beats though the classic A-10. Like I love the Gal gun. Like that is the big boy. Like in the A-10, that literally that plane was like designed around that gun. Basically, they put the titanium bathtub in there, but they built it all like around the gun. It seems like.
Yeah, it's a pretty unique little thing, the Gal 10. Not as effective as some people would like it to be, but it's still incredibly neat, and it also makes one hell of a sound. But also, here's a little infographic for all of you to show y'all exactly how it works in the F-16. And there's the ammo drum right there. It sits sideways, actually, behind the pilot, and then the feed belt comes right out of the drum and right into the gun. I think it can hold something like 750 rounds in the drum, and that sounds like a lot, but the reality is that's maybe a 10-second burst from the gun, and then it's out of ammo.
Interesting. That's fascinating.
Yeah, it's pretty cool stuff. So let's watch that video again now knowing that they actually shot down the Shahed with the gun, and let's listen to it another time.
Весь, суку! Бачу! Я снял все! Молодец, засранец!
That is sick. You can actually hear it. Like, you can hear both bursts of the gun. That is so cool.
О, хорошо! Красавец! Оце відео получилося. Охуєвші всі будуть. Красава!
That's some really good footage, by the way, too.
Yeah, it's really great footage. And you see the little fragments of the Shahed falling apart and to the ground. And that's the end of the clip. But moving on from that and out of that air defense footage, it is time for us to move on up into the area of LAvizan, where we were actually able to hear that the Russians came under a significant long-range drone attack on another troop staging area, and it does appear that there was some decent damage inflicted.
Ой-ой-ой-ой-ой-ой-ой-ой. Иди сюда, сука. Иди нахуй сюда. Ой.
Вот, нас пролетает. Еще один летит туда.
Ебать.
Вот, разгоняется нахуй. Блять, садись нахуй.
And we can see the fires in the distance already started by other drone impacts in LAvizan. And another impact.
Блять.
Ух.
Подстанция.
Ух. Не, это сейчас еще будут. Я тебе...
And that's the end of that clip, but still showing us the impacts on the ground near to the area of LAvizan. Outside of that, we also get to see more Ukrainian action occurring around the Russian hits in Kursk, but we actually have breaking news coming out at the moment. What do we got, Matthew?
All right, so right this very second, we're getting breaking news, very big breaking news out of the Middle East. We have just gotten word that the Israeli Air Force eliminated Amanpour Judaki, who's the commander of the IRGC Air Force's 2nd UAV Brigade. This is a very high-profile assassination, and this was alleged to be the guy that was taken out in a precision strike inside the city of Qom, inside of Iran. So Judaki was responsible for coordinating hundreds of UAV attacks against Israel from Avaz in southwestern Iran, and he had recently taken on a central operational role following the June 13th elimination of UAV headquarters commander Tahirpour. So it sounds like that guy right there he's actually been eliminated as of right now, and he's no longer in command, obviously, because he's been taken out. So that is a very big hit by the Israelis and a very big one to report on right this second. So, Enforcer, I'm going to let you weigh in, and then we have some more breaking news after that.
And it does appear that another significant drone commander has been killed at this moment by the Israelis. We were able to hear that this apparently occurred on an airstrike in Qom, which we have seen hit before by other significant airstrikes. So once again, the information does appear to be lining up at the moment. And another significant leader of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps taken out and killed. But also, Matthew, what additional news do we have?
All right, so we're learning some more information here from the Intel Frog on Twitter about the POTUS National Security Council meeting that he will be attending tomorrow around the evening Eastern time. So apparently POTUS is returning early for the meeting. He was not planned to be back at the time, but he is coming back urgently and early from whatever he's doing right now. I guess he's golfing or something. I don't know, but he's going to return early to go to the NSC meeting in the White House. And the assets, this is another big piece of news from Intel Frog, the assets being moved into place in the Middle East will just be hours away from the line of departure by the point that NSC meeting takes place with POTUS in the White House. So that's another pretty big indication that this could be the meeting for the go or the green light for an attack on Iran. This could be it, but there's no telling. It's just kind of speculation right now, but it appears to be this could be a high-stakes NSC meeting that's taking place tomorrow in the evening. So pretty big news.
And so it does appear that the president will now be returning early, most likely to possibly give a green light. Well, most likely that's not really the case. Possibly to give a green light. We don't know if it's highly likely or not, and we do not really know what will be coming out of the NSC meeting tomorrow. But still, major news nonetheless, and a big thanks to Enforcer Matt for breaking that news while we are here on air. But moving us on back into the Ukraine war segment inside of the Kursk Oblast, we were able to see that the Ukrainians did hit and eliminate Russian drone operators in the Kursk Oblast west of Sudzha in some airstrikes that occurred just today. And when you see those airstrikes hitting the facilities or buildings that the Russians are inside of and wiping them out clean. Attacks on drone operators has become something incredibly important and very significant for military operations on both sides of the Ukraine war, as drone warfare pretty much dominates the Ukrainian battlefields in the present day, as the Ukrainians, for one, try to mitigate their losses, and second, the Russian Federation tries to account for the significant, unmitigatable losses that they've already taken so far due to Ukrainian drone warfare tactics. Outside of that, we also were able to see the Russian casualty report for the past 24 hours, and we were able to see that once again, the Russian Federation has taken significant losses. According to Ms. Disa, the keeper of the records, there is some consistency in the daily losses, indicating this is a new normal level for now. Troop losses have averaged about 1,100 a day for weeks, with equipment losses varying more, but without major highs or lows. And we can hear that 1,090 Russian forces have been wounded and killed in the past 24 hours, along with 7 APCs, 81 supply trucks, 3 main battle tanks, 46 artillery pieces, 70 drones, 1 MLRS, 1 anti-aircraft warfare system, and 2 Bobcat skid steer special equipment vehicles. We can also hear, outside of that, further down on the fronts and near to the area of the Severonsky Forest front, that Russian forces have continuously been targeted and hit by the Signum drone units of the Ukrainian Armed Forces of the 92nd Brigade. And we can actually see here a Russian supply truck getting targeted and destroyed by a Ukrainian drone. We can also see a Russian Buhanka, which is a supply van, also being targeted and destroyed. We can then see some communication and electronic warfare systems being targeted and destroyed by the Ukrainians as well, which play a significant part on the modern battlefield, as communication is vital for forces to be able to coordinate and command each other's units, and also be able to get an understanding of what the general situation or conditions are on their current active front lines. We can also see them continuing to target more light Russian support vehicles, including motorcycles and Buhanka vans, and we can also see that some of these vans have been turned into pickups, largely to be able to carry more supplies or to be able to allow for the rapid onloading and offloading of personnel. Outside of that, we can also see further down the line and near to the Konstantinivka or Chasiv Yar front that the Ukrainians have continued to hit Russian forces, which are using some of the oil and gas pipes, which were once used in this area, as a form of cover or ability to move through the open without being seen or directly hit. It didn't really work for these Russians. It appears the Ukrainian drone operators were able to target the Russians attempting to use the pipelines and were able to take them out before they could actually start to travel through the pipe to wherever they were heading, largely making this Russian movement a pipe dream. We now see the Ukrainian drone operators moving the drones on in and getting ready to take out the Russians that have been able to move into the pipeline. And you see them hitting the Russians inside the pipe right there. We can actually see the smoke traveling through the pipe. And then we can also see another drone coming in and hitting the pipe a second time. We can now see a third drone coming in and also hitting the pipe.
I heard this is what they mean when they say one in the pipe. You know, like those prepper people, they're like one in the pipe and like 9 in the clip or something like that.
Man, this is let's see, 3 in the pipe and 5 out the chute, I suppose, because they got a lot of Russians inside of that pipe. But I
That
guess
sounds like a recipe from weapons malfunction.
it does. It actually sounds like a pretty bad weapons malfunction is coming around. Outside of that, and in the area of Toretsk, we also got to see more Russian armor being destroyed as it was attempting to advance through the open fields north of the city of Toretsk, which we can see in this clip right here. And we're going to be muting that. It appears there might be some copyrighted audio in that. But we can see here the footage now being shown by the 101st of the 4th Guards Battalion. And we see a Russian tank here, either with a bad filter in the engine or attempting to deploy a smoke screen. And it actually just ran over an anti-tank mine, so we won't really have to get an answer to that question anymore. It's now been a destroyed vehicle. We can now see 2 additional Russian armored vehicles attempting to cross the road near to the area north of Toretsk and making its way into the fields west. What you can actually see is a column of 3 Russian armored vehicles. And we see that the first one is now running over an anti-tank mine and has been disabled and possibly destroyed. Some of these anti-tank mines, especially the TM62 anti-tank mine, which is the most ubiquitous form of an anti-tank mine on both sides of the conflict, has a significant explosive yield and is able to actually cause extensive damage not only to the suspension and wheel systems of the vehicles, but is actually able to penetrate the bottom of the hull as well. The hulls on armored personnel carriers and tanks are generally weak, and we have been able to see in video and picture evidence in the past that some of the spall or shrapnel is able to puncture into the hull, possibly causing ammo detonations in some armored personnel carriers and main battle tanks, or at least causing fatalities and injuries of significant varieties inside of the tanks and APCs that become victim of these sorts of attacks. It does appear that we are now able to see that 2 of these armored personnel carriers were actually destroyed, leaving only 1 of the surviving APCs in the column left at this point. We were also able to see what appears to be a motorbike assault battalion and then passing by shortly after and then being targeted by Ukrainian long-range heavy caliber mortars, which sent them scurrying into the tree line. Now the Ukrainian FPV drones are coming in to seek out the motorcycle crew operators and attempt to knock them out before they can get back on the road and start heading further out. We can also see that a larger number of APCs has now been lost in between the last clip and this one, as we saw that 2 what appears to be MTLBs were lost to anti-tank mines. We can now see that another 2 APCs were also lost to anti-tank mines or drone activities in between the last clip and this one. Showing us that a significant loss of armored personnel carriers has been had at the moment. We can now see the Ukrainian drones coming in and attempting to target the remaining Russian drone operators, or largely infantry throughout this area. And we can also see them targeting destroying a BMP-3, which is actually a fairly rare armored personnel carrier at this point in the conflict. And we now see another drone coming in and hitting a Russian APC, once again either with a bad filter or a faulty smokescreen. We can also see that this BMP just actually ran itself headlong into an anti-tank ditch. Interestingly enough, we can actually see it stopped right before the ditch, and then it actually floored it into the ditch, and then stuck itself into the ditch. A little bit interesting to note that. We can also see another destroyed BMP, destroyed at a much later date, or an earlier date than the footage that was made. And we can also see that the BMP-3, hit earlier in the drone strikes, actually suffered a critical fire, which burned it to cinder for the large part, along with the other APCs also showing significant damage to the point that they've been totaled or completely destroyed and will not be able to be recovered. Outside of that, it does appear the Ukrainian defensives near to Toretsk are still largely successful at the moment, and we also were able to see that within the area of Pokrovsk, the Ukrainians were also targeting and attacking Russian forces in the 68th Jaeger Brigade that were attempting to push towards the city of Pokrovsk again. The city of Pokrovsk has been a significant battlefield, and we have been able to see that Russian offensive efforts have largely been held off and have been focalized at Seladove, but have not been able to advance any farther. This is due to the fact that the Russian Federation now lacks a significant amount of armored vehicles, either in the form of armored personnel carriers or main battle tanks, to actually be able to press forward successful offensives, or at least provide a minimal amount of armor protection to their infantry. This leaves their infantry as sitting targets in the open fields for Ukrainian drone operators to come through, and take them out like we're seeing in these videos right now. This has made offensives practically impossible in the modern warfighting scenario on the battlefields of Pokrovsk, and it makes it to where the Russians can really only advance through open countryside fields, but are not able to get even close to the actual inhabited center of the city of Pokrovsk that is now being occupied and inhabited by the Ukrainian army. Outside of that, we are going to be moving on from our footage near to that area of Pokrovsk and further down towards Kurakovy, where we also were able to see the 35th Marine Brigade burning Russian positions in the night, once again with their drone forces. But we also have more developing news coming out of other major situations at this time. So Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so not necessarily breaking news, but it is some very interesting footage that we're getting right now, apparently showing the U.S. and coalition forces building up at the Saudi Arabia's Prince Sultan Air Base, and it seems to be very clear satellite footage. It looks like it's coming from a Chinese satellite company here. We're currently seeing on this imagery, there's at least 20 new aerial refueling tankers that have arrived at the airbase since early this month, along with nearly 40 new F-15 and F-16 fighters that we see here on the base. If you actually click on the post enforcer and scroll down to the comments, there is a subsequent post right there. This is a much clearer image from a Chinese satellite company, and it appears to show a hell of a lot of aircraft at this airbase here inside of Saudi Arabia. So very interesting to see.
So we can actually see a large number of KC-135s, specifically some C-130s, and then a massive number of F-15s and F-16s at the Prince Sultan Air Base inside of Saudi Arabia. We can actually find out where that is exactly. Prince Sultan Air Base. Here we are. So where is this relative? Oh, this is just southeast of Riyadh, the capital of Saudi Arabia. And we can actually see here the specific airbase tarmac, and we can actually see what usually was here at the airfield. We can see some KC-46s. We can also see a significant number of C-130s, and we can also see some private jets, most likely Embraers, that were being used either by the Saudi Air Force or the U.S. Department of State or the Department of Defense. Outside of that, we can now see in the present day that this number has greatly changed. And there are a large amount of F-15s and F-16s, which are both multi-role aircraft, at least modern variants. And we can also see a large amount of stratotankers in the area as well, once again showing that a major military operation is building up. As a matter of fact, this is also confirming that our prior analysis was true, that every single stratotanker that we were seeing on public transponders on Flight Radar 24 was carrying a large amount of aircraft behind them in tow that were flying along with them through the Atlantic and then over Europe into the Middle East in prior days that we've been covering all of that information. And also once again confirming and putting to rest the rumor that all of those stratotankers were flying out to go be a part of a NATO military exercise, which doesn't appear to be the case at all. It appears that all of those stratotankers and aircraft were flying their way into the Middle East, at least from what we can see from this Chinese satellite footage, which was provided to us, at least here on Twitter at the moment. But still, incredibly interesting developments nonetheless, and still showing us the United States is preparing for offensive action against the Iranians and not defensive action. Outside of that, though, we are going to be moving on back into the 35th Marine Brigade's footage of detonating and destroying Russian positions in the tree lines near to Kurakovy. And here's the clip. We can actually see the Ukrainian drone fly on into the tree line and then detonate once it gets to a Russian dugout, which it'll do right there. We can see the debris was actually scattered through the tree line as a result of the explosion, and that's the end of the clip right there. But moving on from that and out of that clip, it's now time for us to move on over to Velika Novosilka, where we also got to see the Ukrainians hitting the Russians in some houses within the area, just in the northwest of Velika Novosilka, which we can see in this clip right here. And we see them hitting the positions pretty accurately. And to some of the folks who are new, I actually see a lot of people who are new in the chat saying, wow, the footage is so clear coming out of Ukraine. It's a little bit ironic that that's the case, because all of Ukraine's weapon systems that they generally use are cheaper by the thousandths of a fraction, well, by like times 100 or 1,000 than most weapons that the Israelis are using right now against the Iranians. What's hilarious about it is that all of these drones that they're using are generally consumer-grade drones that are equipped with 4K or 180p HD cameras that are actually of a much higher quality than the cameras you would find on multi-million-dollar ballistic missiles or cruise missiles that are being used by the Israelis, which is probably one of the most ironic things that you could ever think of. A several $1,000 commercial drone has a better camera with better quality than that of a multi-million-dollar cruise missile that the Israelis are using against the Iranians. It's kind of a little bit ironic.
It kind of shows you that sometimes the simpler solution is sometimes the better solution, actually.
Yeah, it actually is a little bit crazy when you think about it, man, because, like, the Israelis are spending millions of dollars to target and destroy Iran's 60-year-old Air Force. The Ukrainians, just for y'all to know, right before we started covering the conflict in Iran, the Ukrainians went and destroyed 34% of Russia's strategic bomber force, which is hundreds of millions of dollars of losses, with a couple of tens of thousands of dollars of FPV drones that they bought off of Temu online about a couple of months before that operation happened. So as far as cost efficiency, the Ukrainians, at least as far as modern wars are going, the Ukrainians are masters of cost efficiency in fighting a war. They are fighting a war against a near superpower-sized military, at least on paper, for pennies on the dollar compared to what the Russians are spending in the conflict currently, which is pretty impressive when you put that onto an economy of scale like this. Outside of that, that is pretty much all the frontline news that we were able to gather from Ukraine today. And moving on from that and on up into Kyiv, it is now time for us to get to a speech from the president of Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky. Also, really quickly, for new viewers, if you're wondering why is this a installment tonight, it generally is so that way Enforcer Matt can meet and can take a moment to get a little bit of water or possibly go to the restroom, because these streams are quite long, and usually we want to be able to have a little bit of a downtime, at least in the halfway point of the show, to be able to take care of that stuff and then get back on air. Just in case you're all wondering why this is done every night. And also, we would do it on other leaders. The only issue is that no other leader in the world is consistently doing addresses on a daily basis. So we picked Zelensky to do this. So with that, here is the speech. Peach!
Bitch!
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці, українки. Коротко про сьогодні. Обмін – ще один етап. Готуємо наступні. Сьогодні додому в Україну повернулись наші воїни різних складових сил оборони. Багато хто з них понад 2 роки був в полоні. Процес обмінів має тривати. Сьогодні ставка, була дуже детальна доповідь по фронту, окрема увага Сумщині, діям в прикордонні. Я вдячний нашим підрозділам за стійкість. У росіян там були різні плани, наміри, абсолютно божевільні, як завжди. Стримуємо і знищуємо цих вбивць, захищаємо нашу Сумщину. Також дуже детально обговорили всі домовленості щодо постачання зброї. Контракти, фінанси, конкретні зобов'язання партнерів. Обсяг підтримки на цей рік найбільший за всі роки повномасштабної війни. Доручив ще збільшувати роботу з партнерами заради інвестицій у наше виробництво, в нашу зброю. Ми готуємо і нову платформу для таких виробництв. Це довготривала системна робота. Я хочу подякувати кожній країні, яка вже бере участь. Ми готуємо нові домовленості на наступний тиждень. Ми разом з партнерами по НАТО. І саме щодо інвестицій у виробництво. І це передусім технології, це передусім дрони, снаряди до артилерії. Окремо працюємо і щодо дронів-перехоплювачів, які мають збільшити захист від шахедів. Кілька наших вітчизняних підприємств, відповідно видів дронів, дають результати. Ми працюємо з нашими партнерами заради більш відчутного фінансування, і це, я впевнений, це буде. Обсяги виробництва перехоплювачів вже нарощуються. І була сьогодні тривала доповідь щодо нашої санкційної політики, саме тих напрямків, які б'ють по економічних спроможностях Росії на нашій тимчасово окупованій території. Ми готуємо відповідні рішення РНБО. Сьогодні ж є і новий санкційний пакет нашої держави проти фізичних та юридичних осіб, які допомагають Росії, зокрема у виробництві дронів. Продовжимо цей тиск і разом з нашими партнерами. Наші санкції будуть продовжені партнерами. Ми працюємо над цим. І, до речі, не тільки в європейських юрисдикціях. Ще одне. Доручив команді готувати деякі додаткові можливості співпраці в рамках коаліції охочих. Те, що буде посилювати нашу спільну архітектуру безпеки. Росіяни сьогодні знов абсолютно відкрито та абсолютно цинічно сказали, що їм не хочеться йти на припинення вогню. Росія хоче воювати. Чимось там ще погрожує. Це означає, що їм поки що не боляче від того тиску, який здійснює світ. Або вони дуже стараються зробити такий вигляд. Що ж, російська економіка вже деградує. Підтримуємо цей процес ще більше. Аятола Путін може побачити по своїх друзях в Ірані, до чого приходять такі режими і до якої відсталості вони доводять свою країну. Буде більше наших рішень заради відновлення безпеки. Я дякую всім, хто нам допомагає. Дякую всім нашим людям. Слава Україні!
And Hiram Slava.
And with that, that is the end of the speech from the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, and that is going to be moving us on into the second segment of the stream, where we get to talk to all of y'all. Now, once again, to guide all of our new viewers through how a normal stream works instead of a breaking news stream, which most of y'all are probably familiar with at this point, because we've been doing those pretty much endlessly for about the past week and a half. A normal stream usually works in two separate segments. One segment where we cover all of the news that we've been able to compile over the 24-hour cycle, and then a second segment of the news, well, not a second segment of the news, but a second segment of the stream where we then talk to everyone that's thrown in super chats, and we also address as many live chats as we can. This segment usually is a free-for-all kind of a segment. We will literally talk about just about anything and everything in this segment, no matter what, but generally a lot of people keep it on topic with their super chats and questions, and ask questions about what's going on in the conflict, or all of the conflicts that we're covering right now. But beyond that, that's generally how it works. So if you're here on the stream at this point, I do have to let y'all know, we want to be as transparent as we possibly can. There may be some breaking news developments that come out during this segment, but we're not going to be covering news endlessly. It's not going to be news-rich at all from this point of the stream onwards. This segment's pretty much just used to get the chit-chat with everyone, and also thank all of the super chatters who are supporting this channel that make it possible for everyone to be here for the news segment. That's pretty much been an hour and 50 minutes long at this point. So I hope that does address that the best we can, at least with what we have at the moment, on everything that's been going on and how streams work and all of that. And with that, it is time for us to get on into this second segment. And so, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so jumping into our final question segment of the night, we do not have any more polls to address, so we're jumping straight back into our super chats proper, and our first one here is going to go to Ari Sawini, who puts in a $50 donation, and Ari is a longtime channel legend as well. And thank you very much, Ari, and it's good to see you once again. And they said, LSA.
Hey, and a big LSA to their favorite Kiwi wife and Finn here. And I got to thank y'all both massively for supporting the channel and helping her keep on rolling, because if it wasn't for y'all, the Lee Spring Army and the Enforcer channel would have never survived past those opening months. I got to thank you massively so much once again, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we would have never been able to make this thing possible. We wouldn't have been able to keep it running. Like I got to say, it's just a really crazy thing, like looking back on this whole week so far, and it's still going on. I mean, every single day is a day of history being written in the pages of the books right now. And I got to say, it's just really crazy to know that folks like you have been supporting us along the way the entire time, Ari Sawini, and have helped us to be able to make this not only into a job, but a massive following. It was actually a little bit weird today, folks, because I actually saw, for the first time ever, one of my friends actually saw us in a Facebook feed, just out there. Like, people are actually sharing our stuff around now. And he sent me that, and he was like, I cannot believe this, but I heard your voice in this short, and I cannot believe that people are reposting your stuff. And I went and looked, and it actually had blown up on Facebook, and loads of people were saying really good stuff about our coverage. They were asking who we were, and were saying all kinds of nice stuff about our coverage and information that we were giving about the Iranian attacks on Israel. And it's just really crazy to think that over the years, we've gone from being able to cover the biggest thing that was going on in the world at the time, which was Ukraine, and we've been able to cover pretty much every major global development that's been going on since then, many years ago. I mean, we were live on air, you know, to cover some of the wildest stuff: the death of Queen Elizabeth II, the assassination of Shinzo Abe in Nara, just east of Osaka in Japan. We were able to cover the North and South Korea border schisms that occurred for a while. everything that's ever gone on with China and Taiwan, the 1 week long India-Pakistan border conflict, everything that's going on in the Middle East since October 7th of 2023, which crazily enough was about a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, almost at this point. Everything that's going on in Ukraine, everything that's going on in Europe, everything that's going on in the United States. We covered the balloon, like if y'all remember the giant Chinese balloon that flew over the United States, we covered that. I mean, we've been covering everything for years now, and it's been thanks to folks like you. We've been able to do this as our full-time job and turn this into something that apparently has gotten so big it's getting bigger than us by far. It was already bigger than us before. It's getting way bigger than us by far at this point. And I gotta thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we would have never been able to make this thing possible. We would have never been able to make it to this point, and we wouldn't be able to be known on the internet as one of the forefront sources of global news. So a huge thank you to you once again, and we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat goes to Pagetto666, who puts in a $28 donation. And thank you very much, Pagetto, for that $28 support. And we do appreciate that. He said, excellent coverage, Enforcer and Enforcer Matt, and click the like button and LSA.
Hey, and thank you so much for supporting. If y'all have enjoyed it so far, please make sure to hit the like button. We cover news like this every single day, guaranteed, except for Mondays. Usually that's our off day. It wasn't our off day this Monday, though. But I do thank you so much once again. And of course, we appreciate folks like you for helping this channel to keep on rolling. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Friend Wilkins, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Friend, as well, for that support. And they said, I appreciate all that y'all do.
And I got to thank you so much for appreciating everything that we do, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing a reality. We wouldn't be able to keep it rolling. And I got to thank you for enjoying this channel and helping us to keep on running. And so with that, I hope that addresses that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Jody Mandalias, who puts in a 20 also. And big shout out to Jody for that support as well. And she said, LSA and hit the like. And thank you for all the research, the info, and the humor.
Hey, and thank you so much for enjoying the research, the info, and the humor. We try and balance it out with a couple of jokes here and there. We're trying to make them a little bit more tasteful instead of making the whole thing like a slapstick comedy. But I hope that people are still enjoying it nonetheless. And I got to thank you so much for enjoying the channel and helping it to keep running, because once again, folks like you make this thing a reality. And if it wasn't for folks like you, we would have never been able to make this thing possible. And we wouldn't have been able to keep it rolling even today. So a massive thanks to you once again. And we are going to grab another one.
And the next one goes to Steve T. And Steve put in a 20 and said, do you think Russia and Putin's statements will call the United States bluff on Iran? And the U.S. gave Russia multiple ultimatums with supplying Ukraine with weapons, but backed down every time. And does anyone believe U.S. statements anymore?
Oh, that's a great question. I generally have a decent amount of apprehensions myself on any ultimatums or statements that are made. We can't really work on that, though, on a coverage perspective, because then that kind of gets into our personal biases and stuff. And I personally didn't have a lot of biases when I originally heard those statements being made at the beginning of the Ukraine war, or at least the shift in thinking that the president had after he tried to blame Ukraine for a while, and then he shifted the blame to Russia, and then he started giving ultimatums like that, and then every ultimatum would come and go. That started to wear down a lot of my, at least, belief in that these statements are actually foolproof or watertight, and they actually will follow through on what they say. But as far as it goes with Iran, I don't really think we have an option. The Iranians are about to nuclearize. If we do not do something about it, they're going to have a nuclear weapon. And if they get a nuclear weapon, it's not going to end up boding us well. Or at least it's not going to end up boding the current majority party well. Because everyone's going to blame them for it and say, how could they not see this coming? Why didn't they stop it? We could have stopped it. And they'll be right. I mean, they could have stopped it. They could have done something about it, and then they wouldn't have. So in this particular instance, they really don't have a choice. And if the Russians want to say something in this particular instance, then I think that we're largely going to just ignore them. That's what I would believe. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least from what I would think, what my 2 cents would be on that. I think on this one, there really is no way to waffle on the ultimatum. And also there's a little bit more at play, considering that the United States has a significant strategic relationship, and has had for decades, with the Israelis. And generally we come to the aid of the Israelis really much faster than anyone else in the world, to be entirely honest. So with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. I thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I also saw Matthew address something before we move on into the next one. He said, why are we biased towards Israel? Well, I mean, that's really a good question on anything. Why are we biased towards Ukraine, Israel, Taiwan, South Korea, Japan, Europe, so on and so forth? It's because, so people who may be new to the channel, this isn't Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, what's that guy's name, Matthew? Hassan show. These aren't those kinds of people show. It's Hassan Pike or whatever his name is. Those aren't those kinds of shows where they pretend to be Americans and pro-American, but they say everything that's against American interests, and generally they come off as un-American to me. This show is truly a pro-American show. And because it's pro-American, we actually understand that there are things at risk and things at stake out there in the world. This isn't a fantasy land where you can just do nothing or do things inherently against your interest and then just sit back and everything's fine. It doesn't work like that out there in the world. There is a lot at stake every day that is a part of our sphere of influence that makes America what it is, what makes us have the good times here at home. And it's because we're out there in the world every day doing what we have to do. And because of that, we are biased because we are patriots of the United States of America. And so for that reason, we look out for our national interest abroad here on the channel. We are not biased when it comes to politics. We are very nonpartisan when it comes to politics. We won't even touch domestic politics here on the channel with a 10-foot barge pole. But one thing that we are going to be quite clear on is that we are never going to say that an enemy of the United States or a self-proclaimed enemy of the United States has a point in being an enemy of the United States. That is something that we will never stoop down to the level of here on the channel. And because of that, the enemy of our enemy is our friend. And so the Ukrainians are the enemies of the Russians. The Russians invaded them back in 2022, where the Russians are an enemy of the United States. Therefore, we generally have a bit of a leaning towards Ukraine. We actually have a significant leaning towards Ukraine. With Iran, the Israelis are the enemy of the Iranians. We are also the enemy of the Iranians. Why? Because the Iranians declared Israel and the United States as their enemies. So, of course, we're going to be biased towards the Israelis. We're going to lean in their favor because that's a pro-American kind of a thing to do. They are a country that's also going to bat against a country we don't like. As far as China and Taiwan, of course we're going to lean towards the Taiwanese. One, I'm not a communist. And two, Taiwan is also against one of our enemies in the world, which is the People's Republic of China. So we're obviously going to be in support of our allies around the world, or even if we don't really like those countries too much, we're still going to lean towards them, at least in our bias, because they are supporting our interests around the globe and putting our enemies down. That's generally how it works.
It's even simpler. It's even simpler than that. Israel doesn't want to kill me, but Iran does. Iran wants to kill everybody in the West that they can possibly get their hands on me. That's literally what they say. They say death to America and they say death to Israel. Now, I don't hear Israel saying death to Iran. I hear Israel saying that they want to topple the Ayatollah's regime, which is an oppressive extremist regime, but I've never heard Israel say they want to go wipe everybody in Iran out. That's never been something they say, but Iran feels the need to say that, and I wonder why that is, because, you know, the people that defend Iran, how do you defend that? How do you defend basically calling for genocide? That's what Iran does on a regular basis. You can't defend that unless you're crazy. Like, you just can't.
Also, really quickly, I got to say this. Bleeding heart people, they don't ever win, because I just saw someone say this. I got to ask a question in response to this. Debbie Donovan said, no one wins when people die. That is a very American opinion. So you're saying that we were wrong for going to war against Imperial Japan and Nazi Germany, and we should have just sat back and let Hitler kill all those people in Europe? Is that what we're saying? Because if it's bad when people die in general and we ought to just sit back and do nothing, then we were wrong for going into World War II and fighting the Japanese and Hitler. And we were wrong for stopping the deaths of countless tens of millions of other people that they were going to genocide, both the Japanese and the Germans were, as a result of that. So we should have just, like I don't really know the logic behind that, because it doesn't come up with the actual logical conclusion. Death is wrong, so we shouldn't do anything, even if that means that more suffering and death results because of our inactivity, because of that decision. That doesn't make any sense at all. Because if we went with that kind of a logic or that kind of a philosophy throughout all of our national history as Americans, this country wouldn't even exist today. It wouldn't have even been a country at all. That kind of a logic just doesn't make sense to me, because it's such a pacifist logic that it ends up destroying itself in the end, because someone far more, that has more gumption than you is going to come around and they're going to kick a country with a mindset like that in the teeth. and that country is just going to sit there and take it, because if people die, it's a bad thing. That's what people said, that actually led to World War II, is that the British said under Neville Chamberlain that death is wrong and we ought to do everything we can to avoid death. So we'll give the Germans Austria, we'll give them the Sudetenland, we'll let them even annex Czechoslovakia, and we won't do anything about it. And then, finally, when we realize this isn't getting us anywhere and their ambitions just keep going farther, and then they're about to invade Poland, then that's when they drew the line. And then guess what? At that point, the Germans had militarized so much and had built up their armed forces so prolifically from 1936 to 1939, then it actually became the bloodiest conflict in global history because of that very mindset right there. If people actually had the mindset, which I would consider the only right one in the world, is that we avoid war at any costs, but if it's inevitable that we have to go in and do something and we logically deduce that that's the only answer, we better do it as soon as we can instead of waiting. Because if you wait and you have this pacifist or appeasement mindset that has always been the ail of our world, at least in the modern century, you're always going to see that more bloodshed and the absolute opposite result of what you're wanting to achieve follows as a result of that. You have to have a bit of courage and a bit of bravery to do something in the interest and support of your nation and your people, or otherwise your nation and your people will cease to exist eventually. It will happen. So I just
it's just tough though. It's just tough when you have a lot of people. I'm not saying that people can't have differing opinions on things, but some things are a little bit clearer than others. And one thing that is clear is when we see an adversary to our country, if you're living in the United States and you look at a country like Russia, which clearly wants to become the new world order along with China, and you say, oh, well, Russia's in the right, like Russia's just misunderstood. That's all. We just need to give Russia a chance, and that's it. Let Russia invade a few more countries, and hopefully they'll be satisfied. Then we'll appease them, and we'll be good to go. It's a complete lack of understanding of everything, because countries don't operate like friends. They don't operate like people. They operate like countries. They're huge collections of people. The guy at the top is representing the interest of the entire country only if it's democracy. In Russia, the guy at the top represents his own interest, the interest of his gang, which in Russia is called the Kremlin, and it's called the Russian government. It's a huge gang. So when you let a gang like that run amok and start running around invading other countries, it tells the other gangs in the world, like Iran, it's free for all. Go do what you want. You're free to go invade countries. You're free to attack people. Start building proxies, start doing whatever you want. And it's a free-for-all. That's what happens then. And I've never understood people that will say, oh, well, Russia's not in the wrong. We're just misunderstanding Russia. It was actually NATO that caused Russia to invade other countries and commit almost close to a genocide on a whole group of people. It's just insane to me.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane. And it's even crazier to see that a lot of people talk from the same moralistic standpoint that people had talked about 70 years ago, 200 years ago, 400 years ago. It never changes. If you'll go and read the books of history, the same talking points never change. They're always the same. And these people who talk like that, who say stuff like, the killing is wrong, or deaths of anyone is wrong, and we ought to just sit back and do nothing, they end up actually being the largest creators of evil in the world, because they practically enable the evil that will almost come to destroy us in the future. You have to be able to have the gumption and the brains and the sense to actually go out there and deal with this thing. Because if you don't, it's going to be a lot worse. You don't believe me now? We'll follow through with what you want to do, and then you and me will both end up dying for that in about 5 years, probably. That's always how it works. It's the same thing every time.
I just don't know why people want to give credence to other countries, especially countries which have historically been our enemies. I don't understand why people do that. I don't know if it's like the trendy thing these days to be like a contrarian. I know there's a lot of popular figures like Tucker Carlson that like to be contrarians, and they seem to grow large followings doing that. I'm not sure if maybe he's brainwashing a large segment of society that causes people to go haywire. But why wouldn't you just naturally default to having patriotism in your own country and saying, okay, as long as the United States is not doing anything that's terrible or illegal to other countries, obviously if we do something bad, it's up to the people to say, hey, wait a minute, United States government, you need to chill out, because that's not something we need to do. You have a right to protest here. It's not like Russia. You don't have that right in Russia. And the people that defend Russia, it's like, you wouldn't even have the right to speak out against your country if you lived in Russia, but yet you defend that country like they're looking out for your interests. I don't really understand what it is. I think it's like social media brainwashing. It's a mix of like very large voices like Tucker getting platforms that they really should honestly not have, as they're espousing anti-American viewpoints, and people start running with it because they didn't have the knowledge to understand it to begin with. It's kind of scary, honestly, in the modern day how that works.
Yeah, it's really scary. It's even scarier, honestly, because when you what's crazy, Matthew, is that when you read about it, like, remember me telling you about the ATPs, the declassified ones from about 2020, about a year ago? They were talking about Chinese and Russian, North Korean and Iranian military tactics, all in general, pretty much like the Big Four.
Yeah.
And remember how they even admitted in the ATP that the People's Republic of China actually was planning on pretty much infiltrating or finding a way to infiltrate American social media platforms to start to do soft propaganda on how the People's Republic of China as a dictatorial system is actually a good system, and that they shouldn't really dislike the People's Republic of China for it. And in fact, it's actually good, and it's something that they should advocate for in the United States. And then they said they actually abandoned that because it turns out they were able to just get everyone onto the Chinese social media apps literally wholesale without even having to infiltrate the American ones hardly at all. Things like TikTok and such. And it's just wild to know that people have pretty much taken that brainwashing and run with it. Like, people will say stuff like, I mean, sure, in Russia, people don't have rights and they can't protest and they really can't form their own opinions and so on and so forth, but at least they don't have any real crime. And it's just ridiculous, because if you actually go and look at Russia, there's an insane amount of crime that happens there on a daily basis. It's just that you don't see it in Moscow or St. Petersburg, where all the films are made. And even more so than that, you only see films of Moscow from the 110 square block area that they built to look good, pretty much as propaganda village. And then the rest of the Russians are so poor, they don't even have internal plumbing inside of their houses. They are stealing toilets out of Ukraine and washing machines because they've never even seen or been able to afford one of those in Russia before. Same thing with China. I mean, most of China looks like an absolutely abysmal hellhole out of any of the major cities like Shanghai, Shenzhen, Beijing, and so on. It is a despotic, poverty-ridden hellhole out there in the countryside, and nobody knows that because they just see the hand-fed propaganda, and they aren't able to see the truth because these countries, these dictatorships like these, they specifically curate what they want to get out there into the open world, so they only show you the best. They only show you the finest. And that's another thing too on top of that. That's how it works with everything. Like whenever you see a foreign exchange student inside the United States and you're like, "Oh, this kid's well behaved. He's really smart. Like he makes American kids look stupid." Yeah, he does, because every single country only picks out their best kids to be foreign exchange students. So you're literally seeing the top 1% of their children whenever they send them abroad as foreign exchange students. You're not seeing the average kid from their country that doesn't even know where the hell their city is inside of their country. You don't see that. And it's just endless stuff like that, and that keeps on feeding into the brainwashing in America that gives off this mindset that America is lost. It's a terrible country, and we ought to end up becoming a country like Russia or China, because only then could we be better. Only then, through an authoritarian state of some type, where we just crush this in, can the country become better. And that's not the case. It will become markedly worse. Just look at the two of them. Like, in reality, actually go and look at their countries. It is abysmal in there. It's terrible. I would never want to live in Russia or China or even travel there. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least from what I know. But once again, getting back to the crux of the whole conversation that we started off with, it is wildly clear that you got to have some balls, some cojones, as some people call them, and actually go and deal with problems, and maybe take a few lives lost here and there on our side to deal with it, or otherwise you're going to let this monster grow until it ends up killing millions and not just a few. So you got to make the call. Are you going to let the trolley run over 2 people, or are you going to let it run over 10? What's the call? And so with that, I hope that does address it the best I can, and we are on to the next one.
All right, so jumping into our next channel here, or our next super chat, that is not next channel. I don't know why I said that. This one goes to Cheater Meter, who puts in a $52 donation. And thank you very much for that support, by the way. I think that is your first ever support to the channel, and that's very generous of you. And Cheater said, why doesn't the Russian military use CTSO assets?
CSTO assets? That's a great question. The Collective Security Treaty Organization, which is Russia's equivalent to NATO, is actually only existent on paper for the large part. It isn't really a NATO organization in full, and on top of that, Russia really wields little control over its member states. As a matter of fact, interestingly enough, I believe it was Armenia right there that was actually a part of the CSTO. They still have it on the map, but Armenia has officially left the CSTO, so that means that now only Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, and Belarus are in the CSTO along with the Russian Federation. All four of those countries have shown absolutely no aptitude or desire to actually join the Russian Federation in the current conflict. And while there's been a lot of talk about Lukashenko over the years possibly wielding the Belarusian army, which is about 70,000 strong and mostly a paramilitary police force, in the war in Ukraine against the Ukrainians, it's never been conducted because the Belarusian military largely also serves as the country's police force. And so if Lukashenko sends that abroad, he pretty much has nothing to crush domestic dissent with. And then Belarus will most likely see a really rapid regime change as a result of that. So Belarus is pretty much tied up, just trying to keep their country under wraps. Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan have absolutely no desire to actually get involved in the conflict. Their militaries are incredibly small, also to add on to that, incredibly underfunded, and also the Russians have never even tried to call on these countries to assist the Russians, at least at this point inside of Ukraine. So that's generally the reason why we've never seen that the Russians have called up on CSTO assets. And once again, much like NATO, the CSTO, at least in definition, is a defensive military alliance for the greater part of its creation. That's also the same thing with the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, is that it really only signifies that a country can call upon support if they're being invaded. And the Russian Federation has only been invaded so far by the Ukrainians in the earlier part of 2024. Well, actually, I believe it was the mid to later part of 2024 in the Kursk offensive, which made it about as far in as Bolshoi Solatskoye at its deepest. And even still, it was very hard for the Russians to justify any sort of invocation of a CSTO declaration of war. The only people that we've seen support the Russians, funnily enough, is actually North Korea, which has directly supported Russia materially with munitions and weaponry, along with personnel, which is pretty much a direct joining of the war. And the North Koreans have actually announced that they are an active belligerent in support of the Russian Federation in the current conflict. They are the only country that's actually joined the conflict, and the most ironic thing is that they are not a country that is in the current CSTO. So with that, I hope that touches every base I can about that answer. And generally, to boil it down to its basics, no other country in the alliance is really strong enough to do anything in the war. And secondly, none of them really want to join the war for really the first reason. So with that, thank you so much once again for that massive support and supporting the channel for the first time ever. And I hope that answer was what you were generally looking for. And so a big thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat goes to Andrew Barbaro, who's also a longtime channel viewer and legend, and he puts in a $50 donation. And thank you very much, Andrew, as well, for that generous support. He said, daisies or roses, Mexican or Italian, Microsoft or Apple, mustard or nerve gas. Aha. He said, take one from the chat.
And I thank you for the support. And we will make sure to take one from the chat in your honor. And so what do we got, Matthew?
I think he was wanting us to pick between those options. Honestly, for the first one, I would say roses. The second one, I would say probably honestly Mexican, because Mexican food is honestly busting. No offense to Italian food, it's good too, but Mexican is a little bit better in my opinion when it comes to food. Microsoft or Apple? Apple all the way. I'm not an Apple fanboy, but I do like a good MacBook. Mustard or nerve gas? I think I'll take mustard. But unfortunately, what do you say?
I would have to say, for one, I actually cannot find this. I don't have the spreadsheet open at the moment. So I'm trying to find it right now.
This is the top of the live chat right there. It's the Andrew Barbaros.
Oh, okay. That's why I'm not finding it. Let's see here. Daisies or roses? I'll go with roses. Roses just look better. Mexican food? That's my pick. Italian food is bussin', especially when you get it cooked right, and it's not, like Olive Garden Italian. But still, Mexican food, in my opinion, just ekes out a little bit extra over Italian. I'm, of course, a big person on Microsoft. I have a computer that runs Microsoft software, so I would be a big Microsoft supporter. And I also like that Microsoft is like a dual purpose sort of a PC system, and that it just isn't really like a glorified Excel spreadsheet machine. Microsoft systems can do everything. You can play games, you can do work, you can do anything you need it to. And in between mustard and nerve gas, I generally am not one for nerve gas. I have breathed it in before, not a big fan. I'm just kidding, by the way. I've never breathed in nerve gas before. I would generally pick mustard, though, especially the spicy types. The spicy types of mustard are the best types of mustard, you know, like Dijon and those kinds of types. I don't really like that normal yellow mustard, you know, that Heinz-style yellow mustard that just comes in that giant jug. I just don't know what it is with that mustard, but it just doesn't really have that authentic taste that normal, traditional kind of Dijon or spicy mustard gives you. I think that's just the best kind. But a big thanks to you once again for support. I actually didn't know what that super chat was originally, Andrew Barber. I thought you were just like throwing stuff out. I was like, okay. I was like, thank you for that. But I hope that we were able to answer that the best we can. And also, I just saw James Fan WP Dad say, what about mustard gas? Generally not a fan of that either. I would say I would only have mustard gas after having a delicious hot dog with a large amount of mustard on it. Oh man. But with that, I hope that does address that well, and we will make sure to get a live chat in honor of Andrew Barbaro. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so the live chat question goes to Joseph Cameron. He said, are there any military cargo ships moving?
We haven't been able to hear of any military cargo ships on the move. We do know that there are fleet auxiliaries all around CENTCOM's area of responsibility and even EUCOM's area of responsibility in the Eastern Mediterranean. So if you're calling those cargo ships, technically, yes, we do know that they're in the area, but we haven't been able to hear of any new ones setting sail from like Newport News in Virginia or anywhere else in any U.S. ports or ports abroad. So that would be the best answer I could give at the moment. There's also another thing that I have to point out is that whenever a U.S. naval vessel goes underway, they usually don't really say where it's heading most of the time. Very rarely do they ever do that. And so with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. A big thanks to you so much once again. And before we move on to the next one, Christian said, Japanese food is really good in my opinion. Yeah, I actually would agree. Japanese food is pretty good. Mostly seafood, like at least from what I've had. I've never really had real ramen. So that's kind of my experience with Japanese food is mostly the seafood related stuff. So, you know, like sashimi, sushi. What else, Matthew, have we had? It's generally just been sushi and sashimi, I believe. But Japanese food is...
So.
Yeah, Japanese food is really good. Top quality stuff, especially when you get it from a good place. And it just I generally would say that's under a seafood category. As far as daily eats, I generally consider Japanese food to be more of a delicacy in my diet than a daily eat sort of a thing. Because daily eating that, I could see where I could get tired of that pretty quick. But as far as like having it as like a treat meal every once in a while, I absolutely love Japanese food for that. And let's see here. I see a lot of people throwing in different kinds of foods. Kobe beef. Kobe beef is pretty good. Let's see. Teriyaki is pretty decent. Yeah, actually, that is true. Teriyaki is pretty good. Let's see here. A lot of people are bringing up all kinds of stuff. I actually one time had sea urchin sushi. And I got to be honest with you, folks. A lot of people say great things about sea urchin. I'm not really getting it. Like, I don't really get what was good about the sea urchin. I had it, and it was really tangy. It tasted like eating a penny. And so I wasn't really a big fan of that all too much. But anyways, I hope I was able to address that whole food topic well. We always love to talk about food here on the channel. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat goes to Hal Rose, another longtime channel legend. He puts in a $33 donation, and thank you, Hal, as well for that $33 support. And Hal said, Enforcer Matt, thank you, and Slava Ukraine, and it's all about sovereignty. And pick a question, please.
Hey, and thank you for the support, Hal Rose. And I got to say, Slava Ukraine, and it is all about sovereignty all the time, every time, as a matter of fact. And we will make sure to get a question from the live chat, Hal. And so what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and this one goes to Jonathan from the live chat, who said, will we finally use the Rapid Dragon palletized missile if we join the fight against Iran?
It's entirely possible. We've never seen a deployment of the Rapid Dragon in combat yet, but the system is very unique. It's going to be very potent when used. So I generally would say, I think we may actually see its use in Iran. If we did, it's going to be shocking what kind of damage it can actually end up doing. So a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are going to grab another question. But a big thanks to Hal Rose for sponsoring that live chat.
Indeed. And our next one goes to Azim, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Azim, for that support. And he told me that we answered his question earlier when we did the poll. And I think we did. But to repeat the question one more time, he said, there are Russian nuclear scientists at the nuclear site in Iran, in Bushehr. And do you think that that will deter Israel or the United States from hitting the nuke site?
I generally think that Bushehr will not be targeted because it is an active operating nuclear reactor, a power-producing reactor. And while we've seen that the Iraq IR-40 heavy water reactor was hit, radiological fallout from that was going to be minimal. If you hit a power plant like this, considering that it's using enriched nuclear fuel rods of a 60% grade, this is going to be causing a severe nuclear meltdown of a Chernobyl proportion, like from reactor number 4. And so I generally believe that the Russians are there kind of as a shield, but at the same time, no one's actually going to blow up and destroy this reactor just outright, because it would cause a massive radiological incident. And not only that, it would taint the drinking water for literally everyone in the area in Kuwait, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Qatar, and so on, because the Persian Gulf would start to get irradiated, especially if the prevailing winds start to take that radioactive fallout and pretty much deposit it into the Persian Gulf. So not really a great thing. So I don't really think a lot of the United States or Israel is seriously considering hitting and destroying that reactor at the moment. So a big thanks to you once again. And with that, we are going to be grabbing another one.
And this one goes to R3N, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, R3N, for that support as well. They said, as a Ukrainian American, I say it's time we dealt with the dictators who want nothing more than to hurt people.
I would agree. I don't really know why we continue to act like they might be reasonable people. I don't know why people even say that in the country, like Tucker Carlson or other people who make straw man arguments that, you know, it's for other reasons, or these countries are good people, you know, like the leaders of these countries are good people and they're not bad. It's like, no, they are bad. I also don't even know how in the world Tucker Carlson says that, considering that Putin, like, pimped him out or punked him on his own show when he went over there to interview him. Like, if y'all watched the interview, the whole thing was like Putin was just making fun of him half the time. And then he's still actually, Putin's a nice guy. And then also another thing that he did, this was the stupidest one, I think. He went into a Russian store, a grocery store, and started to compare their prices to American prices. And their prices in the grocery stores were 3 times less than the prices in American stores for the same products. But then he also forgot to tell everyone that the average Russian makes 5 times less than the average American does. So in reality, for the average Russian, their groceries are far more expensive for them than our groceries are for us. He just conveniently forgot to not mention that part, and then just leave out the rest of the explanation there. So I found that one to be a little bit interesting. And he also went into like the nicest grocery store in Moscow as well, instead of showing the average one that you would see anywhere else in Russia. So I was like, oh, that's a little interesting. But I would agree. I think that dictators should be dealt with and treated accordingly, at least as far as we can within practicality. And so with that, a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat goes to Howard Mendelson, another longtime channel legend who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Howard, for that support. Sadly, Howard, I can't read this one off. I get the joke, but sadly, I can't read it because it is slightly political, and we try to shy away from it. Otherwise, the chat might turn into a melee. But thank you very much, Howard, once again, for that support. And Enforcer, what say you?
I got to thank you for the support. Sadly, we cannot read it off, but I do thank you massively once again, because folks like you help us to keep this thing rolling and make this thing possible. And so with that, we are going to be on to the next one.
And our next one is going to go to Sam1234, who puts in a $20 donation. And Sam said, as usual, by far the best play-by-play news on important global events, and keep up the great coverage.
Hey, and thank you so much for the kind words. We try our best, and we're glad to know that a lot of people see us as the greatest at this point, the greatest of all time, whatever people are saying these days. I got to thank you so much for that, because if it wasn't for folks like you all who were helping us to keep this channel running, we wouldn't be able to be around to have a great reputation for pretty much play-by-play news coverage like we're doing right now. So a huge thanks to you once again. I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
And we have a 20 from Jay Bagwell, another longtime channel legend and also a friend of the channel. And thank you very much, Jay, for that $20 support. And we do appreciate that. And Jay said, you boys make it look easy. And if you're new to the channel, welcome. And you will not find better war analysts than right here.
Oh, get the hell out of here, Jay Bagwell. I got to thank you so much for the kind words. Of course, a friend of the channel and also an old guard of the Lee Spring Army as well. I got to thank you so much for the kind words. And I got to say, hey, thank you so much for giving us a plug to everyone here on the channel. If you are new, please do subscribe. We're actually probably about to hit 434,000 subscribers here very soon, probably before the end of the night. And I got to thank you all once again for enjoying. I got to thank you so much, Jay Bagwell, for being around for a really long time and also being one of the great friends that we have off of the stream. Jay Bagwell, folks, is a legend around here. We really respect him a great deal. And I got to thank you so much for throwing in some support and helping us to keep this thing rolling tonight. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And we've also got a $20 support from Wantan Quadruple 8, who puts in a 20. And they said, history today, on June the 20th, 1963, the United States and the Soviet Union agreed to establish a direct communications link, commonly known as the Moscow-Washington Hotline, and seen as a crucial step toward crisis management and LSA. And also, I think that is the red phones, actually. I believe that's exactly what that is.
Yeah, it actually is. That's the red phone. Not really necessarily a red phone, but it's a direct link in between the president's office in the United States, like the office of the president, not the actual president of the United States, where you can just whip out the phone, and then the office of the premier, the leader of the Soviet Union or the president of Russia today in the Russian Federation. It's a little bit interesting with that, how that all works. But beyond that, I do thank you for sharing that, because that's interesting to know that actually happened today in history in 1963, after the Cuban Missile Crisis concluded. So a big thanks to you so much once again. And that was also one of the big things that JFK actually did as a president of the United States, was the creation of that phone line or phone link to the Soviet Union. Pretty interesting stuff. Also, another interesting thing y'all may not know, speaking about early Cold War history, just to give y'all another interesting factoid, when President Dwight D. Eisenhower was president of the United States, he actually had a vice president who, for about a year or a year and a half or so, actually traveled through the entirety of the Soviet Union and all of the republics, and also even some of the Warsaw Pact countries, and learned a lot about how they operated on the governmental level, the society and the cultural systems of those countries, and a great deal else as well, and even talked directly to citizens of the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc. And that guy would later end up becoming one of America's presidents in the late 60s and early 70s, and that vice president was actually Richard M. Nixon. And he's actually still considered to this day to be one of the more forefront of foreign policy leaders on communist or anti-communist actions. Everyone, even still, most analysts consider him to this day to be one of the most in-depth and knowledgeable people on the inner workings of the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact in general. Pretty interesting little fact about that, actually. And also, Nixon and Eisenhower were the ones who actually signed off on the Bay of Pigs invasion, although Kennedy is usually known as the one who had that under his belt as a failure. It was actually those two who signed off on it right near to the end of the administration, and Kennedy decided to press it on forward because it was so far along to being completed, and pretty much everyone agreed, Kennedy, Nixon, and as well as Eisenhower, everyone there was in agreement it was probably going to be a pretty good idea as long as it was executed properly, and then it failed. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. A little interesting fact about early Cold War history there. I thank you so much for sharing a little day in history there and giving us a little bit of info about what happened today. And so with that, a big thanks to you once again, and we are on to the next one.
And up next, big shout out to Cats Rule for putting in a 20, along with Just Chillin' for also throwing in a 20 as well, and then a 20 from Arizona Traders, and also another 20 from R3N yet again. And huge shout out to all four of you, Cats Rule, Just Chillin', Arizona Traders, and R3N, for that support. I did not see comments left with any of those, but we do appreciate that very much. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I got to thank each of y'all for the support. Y'all didn't throw in comments, but we are incredibly appreciative for y'all's support. Y'all help this channel to be a reality and help it to keep on rolling, because if it wasn't for viewers like y'all who supported the channel, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible for about 250,000 people tonight. So massive thanks to you once again, and we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Cindy Mitchell, who puts in a 20. And Cindy said, it's been ill for a wee while. And Tucker, the youngest LSA, is in hockey school now. Oh, very cool. And by the way,
Hey.
he said, and also Cindy said, send it to the chat, Sir Matt.
And I got to thank you so much for the support, Cindy Mitchell. Good to hear from you again. It's great to know that Tucker, who is the youngest member of the Lee Spring Army, is now in hockey school. That's really cool to hear. I hope he's doing well at it. And I got to thank you so much for giving us a little status report and update. I hope everyone's doing well in your little family pod out there. And I hope that things continue to be on the up and up. And hopefully Tucker will become an amazing star of the hockey field. And so with that, we'll make sure to get a live chat in you and Tucker's honor. And so what do we got, Matthew?
And this one goes to Jeff Alley, who said, "Evening, gents, and if and when war starts and Ayatollah decides to flee Iran, what are his options on where?"
Well, if the Ayatollah wants to flee, first they have to line up a country that would take him. And so far, I can only think of one, which would be the Russians. The Russians would take him.
You think the Russians would take in another one? Because they got Bashar. They got him in Russia right now. Would they take two failed Middle East dictators? I'm not sure if they would want to.
Man, the Russians in the Middle East are like those women who drive around and pick up stray dogs on the street. They just can't help it. Like, they're gonna take him in. So I think the Russians would definitely take him in, without a doubt. They're gonna take him in. So Russia would probably be the one. And if they wanted to leave, all they got to do is get in a jet in Tehran and immediately shoot out into the Caspian Sea. They're then in international airspace at that point, technically in the Caspian Sea, and then they just fly on up to Russia. So yeah, I think that would probably be the likely option, because Russia has had no problems with taking in Bashar al-Assad when the Syrian Republic collapsed. So I think it's highly possible that they'll take in the Ayatollah Khameini as well, and he'll also live in exile in the Russian Federation. And maybe Assad and him can, I don't know, as the kids say, shoot the shit in Moscow about how both of their countries collapsed right under their fingers. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. A big thanks to you once again for the support, and help this channel to keep running. And I hope that answers that question well. And we're going to grab another one.
And this one goes to Wen10 once again, who puts in a 20. And he said, "Death that comes from self-defense, although horrible, is never wrong. And that has been a common rule, law, and philosophy, and even under all main religions since ancient times." And want to expand on that for group rules.
And I got to say, I thank you for the support and help the channel to keep on running. And Matthew, can you reread that one really quickly?
Yeah, he said death comes from self-defense, although horrible, is never wrong. And that has been a common rule, law, and philosophy, even under all main religions since ancient times.
And I thank you for sharing that. That's a very interesting sort of a statement to make right there. And I thank you very much for helping us to hear that here on air a little bit. And so with that, a big thanks to you once again. I hope that has addressed that well. And also, Nothing Man of the 3D, I think you were mistaken. Nixon was not an alcoholic. Nixon didn't drink, actually. Just to make that a little clear, at least from what I know. He was, I forgot what specific kind of sect of Christianity he was, but he grew up in a very strict religious household, and I don't believe he ever drank. So, yeah, I think the stories of Nixon being an alcoholic would be a little bit unfounded, because I don't think he ever drank at all. Might be mistaken on that. If anyone knows, correct me on that. But I'm pretty sure that he never drank. He was very sober when he told the plumbers to go into Watergate. I know that. So that's what it is. But with that,
I think he might have had. I think he definitely drank a little bit. I think.
Did Nixon drink? Let me pull that up. So let's see. The simple answer is yes, he did drink, but he was actually a Quaker. That's what I was thinking. He was a Quaker, like the Quaker Oats guy. But beyond that, he did drink, but he was never known for excessive drinking. So the idea that he was a drunkard ordering nuclear strikes is entirely untrue, because from what I've known, and I've read about Nixon a good bit, because while he was a crook, he actually did have some very interesting foreign policy perspectives, and a lot of them were actually really good. He couldn't have been a bad foreign policy decision maker, folks. Like, so not talking about him as for his party affiliation or anything, just speaking on his foreign policy prerogatives, because literally every president after him, up to Clinton, which was the last president around before he died, he even had Nixon as an advisor. I mean, Ford had him, Daddy Bush had him, Reagan had him, and Clinton had him as an advisor, a foreign policy advisor. So if his foreign policy was bad, why did every single Republican and Democrat after his presidency pick him as a foreign policy advisor? Because if his foreign policy was terrible or he was a raving drunk, no one would have wanted him. But people just kept picking him because he just, like, the guy had a knack for foreign policy. He was paranoid as hell, and you know, everyone remembers him as a crook. But beyond that, his foreign policy, if you ever read about it and how he went about it, it was a master class in how to do foreign policy. I'd have to say he was actually fairly good at that, while he was certainly not great at other things. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And also, Matthew, I gotta say, if he ate oats, did that make him just Quaker Oats by default, or no?
I don't know, but if a Quaker lives on Earth, does that make them an Earthquaker?
Interesting. That's an interesting question right there. I think we'll have to get to the bottom of these questions eventually here. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least from what I would know. But I highly do suggest, folks, because there are shining little gems out of every person who's been president, in a sense. Go read about Nixon's foreign policy, because it actually was, at least for his time, pretty damn good, like, I'll admit. And he also, if you ever listen to his interviews post-presidency where people would talk to him about foreign policy, he was, like, near prophetic. He had a very good knack for the stuff, because he actually predicted that the Soviet Union, after its collapse, would turn into the Russian Federation that we see today, like, down to the T. He said a strong man would come in, he would pretty much crush all dissent, he would pretty much run the country with an iron fist, and he would most likely start invasions back into Eastern Europe to start reclaiming lost territory. I mean, the guy was on top of it, and he died back in 1995, by the way, so he was never around to even see the rise of Putin at all. He didn't even know Putin was a guy that existed, but he got that down on the nail. And he also got China down on the nail as well. He also talked about how they were going to liberalize and somewhat capitalize their economy, turn it into a semi-capitalist system, and that they were going to start trying to grow their economy to rival that of the United States. Dead to rights on that. I mean, the guy actually did have a great knack for foreign policy. Not really the greatest president, in my opinion, because of the whole Watergate thing, that pretty much tarnished his whole presidency. But beyond that, foreign policy, he had that down. Like, no doubt about it. But with that, I hope that does address that, at least the best I can, in my opinion. But please, folks, make sure to go read into his foreign policy. It actually was decent. But with that, we are on to the next one.
So we have some breaking news.
Oh, we do?
So we have literally breaking news right this second. We have heard, as of 3 minutes ago, B-2 stealth bombers have reportedly taken off from Whiteman Air Force Base with support from 8 aerial refueling tankers, and we have them here apparently on radar, or on flight radar, that is. We can see that there are some refueling tankers right now in the sky, and it looks like they have left from Whiteman, and B-2 stealth bombers are apparently, allegedly, in tow with them. So that is what we're hearing right this second. Apparently, it looks like the group has reformed and they are heading west. I'm not really sure where they're going, actually. We're sort of unclear at the moment, but it looks like some B-2s have taken off right this second.
That's interesting. That is a massive swath. I mean, look at that. The formations of the Stratotankers. I mean, they're practically flying formation, like, nearly. That suggests that they're going to be going the distance. Like, they're about to go all the way, most likely to Diego Garcia, I assume, because if you look at this, they're taking off from somewhere around Whiteman, at least the Stratotankers are, and they flew up towards Whiteman. We're now hearing that the B-2s took off, and they're most likely going to be following right behind these KC-135s, and they're just going to spot them fuel along the way until they make it to Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean. So it seems as though we are once again bringing out the B-2s and sending them to Diego Garcia like we did months ago to set up in preparation to deal with the Houthis or Iran like we did back then. So now the B-2s are also on the way, which I would say is another sign that something is going to be happening. Because the last time the B-2s went to Diego Garcia, they actually did get involved in limited numbers in the airstrikes against the Houthis. And so if they're moving again, the only people that these bombers could be heading out for are for the Iranians. So with that, I hope that does address it the best we can. This is a major breaking news development, actually, at least in what it's going to be meaning. But it seems that the stuff is about to go down. So with that, and when I say about to go down, it's still maybe like a day or two away. So like not right now. It's going to be a little while. But with that, we are going to be moving on into the next one.
Indeed. Now I'm trying to keep an eye out for more news about that. I'm trying to get some more tracking information to see exactly where these are heading. But we're also not being told how many B-2s have taken off from Whiteman. I'm not sure how many were actively stationed at Whiteman AFB, but it looks like a pretty large deployment of whatever they are that's at that base. So B-2s apparently on the way, at least from what we're seeing right now. But jumping into our next one here, and also someone said OPSEC. This is public information right here, folks. This is not anything secretive. It's on Flight Radar 24. So anybody in the world can see it. It's nothing secret. But moving on to our next one here. This one goes to Randy Smith, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Randy, as well, for that $20 support. He said, sorry I joined late. And what's going on tonight?
A lot. A lot. I hate that you missed it. I do thank you for the support. I hate that you missed it, though. There was a lot. The Israelis blew away a load of air defense today in Iran. The U.S. appears to clearly be joining. We're seeing massive buildups of aircraft throughout the Middle East. We saw 50 F-16s and F-15s at one of the air bases in Saudi Arabia today. I mean, it's been huge developments. I wish I could tell you. There's just been so much, though. It'd be hard to go over it all right now. But I do thank you so much for the support. And if you want to see what's going on, be kind. Please rewind. And also, I think some of y'all may have noticed that I shortened down the intro a little bit tonight to about 8.5 minutes instead of 13 minutes. So you only have to rewind to about 8 minutes into the stream, and then that's when the news starts. And so with that, hope that does address that well. A big thanks to you once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. So let's see here. Also, I'm hearing from some people and also from the information I'm finding out. Apparently, there's typically 14 B-2 bombers that are on, I guess, availability readiness at Whiteman Air Force Base. There's a fleet of 20 that's stationed there, but not all 20 are always ready to go. So typically 14 are available, but we're not being told how many have taken off from the Air Force bases right now. So sadly, we don't know, but maybe sooner or later we will know how many are being sent out from that Air Force base. But jumping into our next one here, this one goes to Garrett Frostag, who puts in a 20. He said, 8 KC-135s in the Whiteman Air Force Base area. And you actually caught that extremely early, by the way, because we see that on Flight Radar. Now we have the confirmation that B-2s are leaving with them. So very good catch right there. But Enforcer, what say you?
And a very good catch, very keen eye right there. I got to thank you for support. Maybe you have a future in the open source intelligence world right there with a keen eye like that. And so a big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep running and giving us a little bit of info. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Robert Tilden, who puts in a 15. And Robert said, I've become a regular, and it's great. And keep up the good work and answer an open question from the chat.
And we will make sure to. And I got to thank you massively for the support and helping this channel to keep running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And we will make sure to get a live chat from the live chat in your honor. So what do we got, Matthew?
And this one goes to O-Tubes, who says, what's with China sending these planes to Iran?
We don't really know. It's a great question. It's been a mystery to all. We don't know what's in them. Like, we know that they're going there, but we don't know what's in the aircraft. So it could be personnel, it could be support, it could be equipment, it could be anything. I have a feeling it's definitely not nuclear weaponry, though. That you can pretty much be certain of. But it is something else. We just don't know what's in them. Because the Iranians aren't saying, the Chinese aren't saying, and no one else is saying anything about them. So with that, I thank you for asking the question. Unfortunately, there's just an informational void there. We really can't give a good answer. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Spuddy, who puts in a 15. And Spuddy said, assuming Israel has tactical nukes, they could hand deliver them to interests of Iranian nuclear facilities, USA bombers not required. And for how long would such a blast prevent operations underground?
Such a blast might not prevent operations underground because the personnel inside may be able to be self-sufficient if the entrances are blown away or caved in, because they may have foodstuffs or other supplies that would allow for them to continue working while they're being excavated out or dug out for the large part. So it may not stop anything. I think the only way that they could deal with the facility is to destroy the actual internal workings of it, clearly. Either a special forces mission, which would be near suicidal, I believe. I don't think there would be a high success chance with that. Or just dropping a GBU-57 mop onto it. That would deal with the problem immediately. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a $10 support from Live Animal, who said markets react sharply to news instantly, but the president has a clear signal from industrialists to help them exit, as it's going to be very big, and keep funds ready for short selling next week, in the words of Live Animal.
And I thank you for the support, and that's a very interesting perspective on it. And we'll have to see if that holds up. You might be right though. And so a big thanks to you once again, and we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Greg Kelly, who puts in the 10. He said, keep on doing the great work, guys.
And thank you so much. And we will make sure to keep on doing the good work. And a massive thanks to you once again. And I just saw Triple C say, isn't Fordo deeper than the MOP can reach? No, apparently Department of Defense officials are saying that the MOP can reach it easily. And also, we all have to remember, folks, that the U.S. weaponry, at least by their publicly stated figures, it's massively understated what they can do because they don't want our enemies to know exactly what we're capable of. So if they say the MOP can penetrate 200 feet of surface terrain before it explodes, you can generally expect that real number is probably going to be 300 or 350 feet, because if we said that it could go through 350 feet of soil before it blew up, and that was the true limit of the weapon, then guess what? Then they actually are going to build Fordo at 450 feet to make sure they have another 100 feet of additional room where the bomb can't reach. So that appears to generally be the case at the moment. And that's also what we've seen with every other weapon system in service, is that they are far better than ever advertised publicly. As the decades pass and more information becomes available and equipment becomes outdated, then the U.S. will go, hey, surprise, they can actually do this the whole time. We just didn't tell anyone. And then everyone's like, oh, well, they were way better than we thought. No wonder we were wiping the floor with Iraq back in the Gulf War and everyone else since then. It's because the weapons are way better than we're even saying. Unlike dictatorships, which usually go the opposite, their weapon systems are pretty subpar quality, but then they greatly over-exaggerate what they can do to an extreme to overcompensate for the weapon system actually being terrible. But with that, I hope that answers your question, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here is going to go to JVT, who puts in a 10. And Jay said, everyone is so worried about Iran's nukes, but what do we know about the stocks of biological and chemical weapons? And I feel like we're all forgetting about some things, and thank you for what you guys do.
We do know that they have a significant cache of biological and chemical weapons inside of Iran somewhere that could be used in the future. There's not really a lot that we can do about them at the moment. So as a precaution, the Department of Defense, under CENTCOM's area of responsibility, has issued out MOP gear. That's not the bomb, the MOP, which is the massive ordnance penetrator, the MOP. That is the MOPP, which is the, I said it, PP, I said it. Okay, there we get a little laugh. But beyond that, the MOP protective gear is to protect against chemical warfare, such as the kind of chemical warfare that Iran may have. So I believe we've issued the entire MOP set, but at the moment I think we're at MOP level 3, which is everything but the gloves. So with that, I hope that addresses that well, at least from what we know at the moment. And a big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep it running. And also, by the way, I actually see that we have something of a little bit of a legend here in the chat, at least between Matthew and me. I want to make sure to give a little bit of a shout out to a Twitter account here for all of y'all to follow. If y'all like to follow a great one for news, I want to give a huge shout out to Phytux News. We actually have one of their folks here in the live chat right now. And I got to say that Phytux is one of the best Twitter news organizations out there. We actually get a lot of our news and information from them, from what they're able to source. They're absolutely incredible. So actually it's Phytux Network, correction. It's not Phytux News, it's Phytux Network. But please make sure to go over on Twitter if you'd like to and give them a follow. Tell them the Enforcer sent you, because they are a massive part of the open source intelligence community on Twitter and are a big part of how we're able to do a good bit of what we do here on stream. So a huge thanks to all of those guys over there at Phytux Network, and a big thanks to you for watching tonight. We absolutely got to thank you and give a huge credit for what y'all do over there. We respect y'all greatly. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here is going to be a $10 super chat from Ryan Waters. And Ryan said, what are the chances that Iran have already shot off some nukes but were intercepted by the Iron Dome and may lend credence to some if what we assumed have been empty threats from Iran?
We have been able to see that there's been no radioactive or radiological debris that has been scattered from an intercepted missile so far, suggesting that there's been no nuclear-tipped missiles fired at Israel. So with that in mind, it's clear still that they do not have a nuclear weapon at the moment, and they probably will not be able to possess one as long as we go in and finish the job. So I hope that answers that well. A big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on rolling. And with that, we're going to grab another one.
And this one goes to Coy Stallings, who puts in a 10. And they said, how long do you guys believe this war, when we get involved, will last? And odds the exiled prince can run a transition government that holds up? And also, where is the Iran army?
The Iranian army is asleep. I don't know where they're at. They're hardly doing any air defense or anything for that matter, and the Iranian Air Force has pretty much already been destroyed, so they don't even exist. But as far as the war going on, I think it will only last a couple of weeks. The Israelis saying that if America joins, it'll be over in days. That's an exaggeration. It'll still take weeks, but it will be over pretty quickly because we can pretty much bomb out the Iranian government from above. Now, usually airstrikes don't work. And if they end up hiding well enough, they might not actually work. But we'll be able to pretty much force all of them into hiding or kill them to create a power vacuum to where the government can be overthrown, and then the problem fixes itself. So we can generally just hang out in the skies over Iran and deal with the problem, but it still will probably take weeks, even with U.S. involvement. But it will be a joyous couple of weeks. It'll be a splendid little war, as the Secretary of War back in the day, I think his name was John Hay, called the Spanish-American War. He said it was a splendid little war, and I think this one ended up just being a splendid little war of a couple of weeks. We wouldn't even have to get anyone in on the ground for the large part down there, and then the whole thing would be over with, and then we could get back on to business with everything else that we've got to do. So I hope that does address it the best I can, in my opinion. I don't really know if the son or the descendant of the prior Shah could create a government in exile and then come back. I don't really know how he could do it, but maybe he can. Maybe he's got a lot of popular support in Iran. I just don't really know on that one. I'll have to be honest. I'll have to declare ignorance generally on that because I just don't really know what the internal political atmosphere looks like in Iran outside of the regime. It's a little bit hard to gauge that, especially from here in America. And so then outside of that, I hope that answers your question well. I was trying to think of anything else I hadn't addressed. I think I've hit all the boxes. But a big thanks to you once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And we're going to be grabbing another question.
And our next one's here. Go to Live Animal once again, who puts in two $10 donations. And they said usually the U.S. president has no interest in maintaining the stock market up. He's interested in getting the industrials out and the short sellers and spread out your short sales, they said. And also they said you might have to take a few losses for the final windfall. Honestly, Live Animal, I don't touch the stock market like on the short selling, any type of stuff like that. That's too risky, in my opinion. I think they did a study back in the day. They had like some old ladies, like they had no knowledge of stock market principles whatsoever. They had them pick some stocks, like individual stocks, and it turned out that the random old ladies just picking stocks did as good as some of the top hedge fund people. So there's a bit of just like a luck factor to it. Of course, there is some technical analysis you can do if you're like really are into that, like looking at charts and things like that. But generally speaking, the safest way in the stock market is just to get into an index fund or something. But even at that, it's still a little bit risky because when the stock market's volatile like it is these days, some days it can just wipe your portfolios out. But you really got to be invested for the long term, or it can wipe you out quick. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say I don't really touch stocks in general. I'm a firm believer in working hard for your hard-earned dollars and then just putting them into savings. Like that's probably not great financial advice to follow. By the way, folks, you might want to put your money into a 401k or something else. Well, I don't know about that. The stock market's been very unpredictable lately. That might not be a great idea. A lot of people got wiped out lately because of the stock market fluctuations. So I don't know at this point. Maybe what I'm doing is sound financial advice for now, at least. But beyond that, I would say that at least from what we've seen so far, and I can generally speak for the current president's prior term from 2016 to 2020, and also, let's see here. The other president's term from 2020 to 2024, I was trying to think of how to word that, whether to say his name or not. I'll avoid that for now. But generally, all of them want to avoid stock market panics because as far as it works mechanically for their party, it doesn't work too well. Because here's how the current American political structure kind of works if we talk about it from the mechanical perspective. This works, by the way, for Republicans and Democrats. This is why you'll see their decision-making processes with us are identical. So President A of either party makes a decision or makes a statement. It causes a panic. The stock market falls. The major companies that have created the super PACs, which fund a lot of the representatives and senators' political campaigns when they come around, get pissed and they start threatening to pull their super PAC lobbying support for those elections for those senators and representatives. That puts extreme pressure on the current president of that party, whether they're a Republican or a Democrat, because all these senators and Republicans are about to eat them alive if they don't stop doing what they're doing. And so then that could threaten the current president's chance at re-election. That's also why a second term is usually when you'll see presidents get a little bit more wild and loose with what they're doing, but still within reason, because they still have loyalties to their political parties and they don't want to see them go down the tubes. But that's generally why you'll see that presidents don't try and crash the stock market. They always try and keep it stable or growing if possible, because that makes the super PACs happy, or largely the companies that support the super PACs happy, and that ensures that the senators, the representatives, and even the people, the super PACs who support the president's election, will most likely continue to fund his next re-election or the elections of the other senators and representatives within the party. It works like that for both the Republicans and the Democrats, and that's generally why, while it doesn't make a great deal of sense to average folks who just, buy and sell in the stock market on a governmental level, it makes a lot of sense to ensure that the stock market doesn't end up falling or crashing for some reason. But I hope that answers that well, at least from how it works on a government level. But I actually will hand that over to Matthew, because he actually has a degree in talking about that very sort of a thing in political science. And Matthew, is that assessment generally correct or not?
And remind me real quick, what was the topic? Because I was researching something else down in Hawaii real quick. What was the general topic?
The president and not wanting to crash the stock market because it could end up hurting their party with
Oh,
supporters such as super PACs and so on.
Oh, yeah, they definitely don't want to crash the stock market because usually they have corporate donors, especially these days. They definitely have corporate donors, and you don't want to piss them off because you might not be able to win re-election. But the only problem is, though, if you're not eligible for another election, you really don't have that problem anymore. But it might hurt whoever the person is that you're trying to basically recommend as your, I guess, your protege, I guess you could say. That might hurt their chances to become president at that point. But it wouldn't really hurt the main guy because if the main president crashes the stock market and he's not eligible for re-election, it doesn't matter too much to him unless he wants a future in the political party. Then he might want to make sure that he doesn't mess that up too bad because it could create a negative view by the corporate donors of that entire political party. So you wouldn't want to do that. But there is a huge impact of that. It's not minor. You're correct in saying that.
Yeah. So while some people may want to say, yeah, the president is fine with tanking the market, really the reality is that he certainly isn't, and also that it will make it a lot more difficult for the president to wield any kind of persuasive authority over his party in the Senate or the House, because if he starts jeopardizing their possible re-elections, they're going to start becoming a lot more rebellious, and at least to the president's wishes, in that political party, and then that also makes it a lot more difficult to wield any kind of persuasive authority, not actual real authority, over your party members in the House and the Senate. So there's a decent reason to not try and crash the stock market as the president of the United States. So with that, I hope that does address that well. I do thank you for the support. And also, Matthew, what are you tracking around Hawaii by chance?
So I was tipped off by our good friend from Fitux Network about some NOTAMs down in Hawaii, apparently that are for the refueling of B-2s down there in Hawaii, apparently tomorrow, I believe it is. But if Twitter would cooperate, I just reposted it, but it's not popping up. So I'm trying to get it back now, as it's not popping up on me here. So let's see. Let me just backspace and go straight back to the post since it didn't repost it.
Well, while you're looking at
There we
that, someone brought up something pretty good. This actually will prove this. Speaking of the super chat here, about the stock market and the president being fine with dropping it. The president, as many of y'all will know, that the president went into tariff wars pretty much against everyone at the beginning of his administration. In this current administration right now, he said that he was going to put 60% tariffs on the EU, 60% tariffs on Canada, and then I believe it got all the way up to 275% tariffs on the Chinese. And we pretty much backed off of all of them because every single time that those were announced, or they were announced in a giant lot, the stock market would panic and it would collapse. That actually came with good reason because that would upend the entire logistical system we work off of, which is an international one these days. And so a lot of these companies would not even have goods to sell, or the goods would be so expensive no one would be buying them, so the company wouldn't be turning profits. And that means that these people's stocks are worthless at that point. But beyond that, y'all would see that once that started to happen, the president immediately started to reverse his decisions because the stock market was crashing, and it would start to jeopardize his ability to control the party at the moment. his political party in particular, and also it could start to cause a whole bunch of other issues like we were mentioning prior. That's a great example of it, even just in a contemporary time frame of just the past few months. So with that, I hope that answers that somewhat well. Once again, speaking about that very neutrally, we could go back and find examples of that in any political party of any prior administration, presidency, and so on, where that happened. But that's the most modern, recent example of such a thing. But Matthew, what do we got from around Hawaii?
So go to our Twitter page real quick and click on the map, the NOTAM map that I just reposted right now. It should be the second post down. Click on this first image here. Y'all might notice there's a area of a NOTAM here where that red arrow is pointing right there. It seems to be a little linear strip right outside of Honolulu, which is in Hawaii, obviously. And this right here is at the altitudes, which the B-2s would be flying at, apparently, if they were to leave Hawaii and start flying out from there and on their destination in the Indian Ocean. So it looks like, and this is speculation, by the way, this is not confirmed. Just because we're seeing a NOTAM in the spot does not necessarily mean for a fact that the B-2s are going to be here, but it is a strong indication that they will likely be here. So we are seeing that right there. If you go to click on the other image, of course, you can see a zoomed out view of it. If you go to our other image, and also you might notice there's like a B-2 shaped like airspace restriction right there. That's not on purpose, by the way. That's just like a restricted area for, I believe, a missile range of some sort or something like that somewhere. I think it's a missile range. But you can see there is the NOTAM, the linear NOTAM right outside of it, heading in the direction of the Indian Ocean. So quite interesting to see right there. That could be more proof that the B-2s are definitely heading down that way.
Well, yeah, and especially considering that the B-2 would, of course, be flying in a straight line nonstop through the Pacific, it would make a lot of sense that it just flies north of Hawaii and then skirts around a specific waypoint directly into that pretty much channel. So that way a KC-135 can refuel it through that area, or that area can just be cleared out for multiple B-2s to be refueled one after the other as they come through that corridor, and then continue to press on out further on into the southwestern Pacific, and then on into the Indian Ocean, probably getting another refueling along the way somewhere. So that is showing us that is most likely another clear sign. The B-2s are clearly heading on their way westbound to the Indian Ocean.
Yeah, I would say so. It looks like it's pretty likely at this moment right now. I'm not sure if this is the same route they took when they went to Diego Garcia the last time. But if it is, though, then we're seeing here a clear repeat of the same flight path that's going to happen apparently tomorrow, because this is for June 21st, starting at 11 a.m. EST, 0300 Zulu. So it's going to be 11 a.m. It's going to be 10 a.m. our time, I believe. Is it 10 a.m. our time or 12?
Let's see. That would be 10 a.m. in Central Time, 11 in Eastern.
Okay, so they're expecting this NOTAM here to be active 10 o'clock Central in our time tomorrow. So it's going to be somewhat early in the morning.
That would actually line up just about, because it's probably because these B-2s can only fly at about 420 miles an hour. It's probably going to take them about a good 12 hours probably from this point to make it there. So that's lining up exactly probably with the first arrival of the B-2s in the area for the first one to get refueled in the corridor, and then just allow for the other B-2s in a staggered formation to come on through the corridor and also be refueled as well by other KC-135s on standby that probably took off from Hawaii, or may have been flying all the way out there with the B-2s, but they'll refuel them through that corridor specifically, and then those KC-135s will most likely divert, land in Honolulu or somewhere around that area, and then be refueled and then take the trip back to their original air bases somewhere else in the continental United States.
Yes, very interesting to see. This is a good piece of news right here. And also shout out to our friend from Phytex Network for pointing this out, because I had not seen this until they pointed it out. This is news to me.
Man, Phytex and Enforcer together again like Toad and Frog. The OSINT community comes together to get the whole story straight. We got to thank all the folks out at Phytex Network for the great work y'all do. Again, y'all do amazing stuff. But with that, it is time for us to get on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Cindy Mitchell, who puts in a 10. And thank you, Cindy, as well for that support. And we do appreciate that very much. And also, excuse me, sadly, we will not be able to read that because it does involve a political figure, and we don't want to get the chat stirred up like a hornet's nest. But thank you very much, Cindy, once again, for supporting the channel. And we also have a 10 from Rad Doctor, and they said, pray for our troops and give them hell, boys.
Hey, and I'd say give them hell over there for sure. And I think it'll go swimmingly, really, if we go up against the Iranians. I don't really think they'd stand a chance too much, even just against the Air Force. And so big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Jake Beghart, who puts in a 10. And Jake said, I keep seeing people leave comments of LSA in Iraq. What does it mean?
And LSA is our community here on the channel, the Leaf Spring Army. It originally was a joke. It's generally grown into a whole thing. It has a flag, an anthem. It's got like an actual kind of like a slight like ideological system to it. Really just generally pro-American and pro-Western all the way. That's just the main defining principles of it. And also trying to do things in the benefit of the greater society here in the United States or in other Western-aligned countries to benefit those nations. And also generally that everyone, no matter what kind of job they have, big or small, they all have a place in their country and are doing something that is actually of worth or value every day, no matter what kind of job or position those folks hold. That's kind of like all the things that the LSA is about. So if you like it, feel free to join it. You pretty much are a member of the LSA if you subscribe to the channel. But I do thank you for support, and that's what the LSA is. And Arak, A-R-A-K, is a city in Iran that has a nuclear reactor near to it. It's a research reactor, not an energy-producing one, so it's not as significant, in terms of radiological damage when it got hit. So with that, I hope that has addressed that well. Big thanks to you once again, and we're going to be grabbing another one.
Also, Enforcer, go take a look at our Twitter page once again. Let's look at some here. Look at this grouping on this group of tankers here. They're flying around. Click on the next image, actually, and there you go. Look at that grouping right there. So we're seeing here two. Yeah, we're seeing here two groups of 4 tankers lined up with the air refueling route west for Whiteman Air Force Base traffic. And we're seeing here, obviously, the spacing being noted by Evergreen Intel. And one thing that was noted by another analyst on Twitter, Intel Schizo, is that apparently the B-2s needed to refuel very shortly after takeoff, which could suggest that the B-2s are carrying a very, very heavy payload on their way out, which might indicate they're loaded down with munitions as they're heading out to their Hawaii base and then heading on to the Indian Ocean to Diego Garcia. That could indicate that, which could mean that they are absolutely loaded up with fuel and munitions together. So, Enforcer, what do you think about that?
I'd actually have to say this probably suggests that there are 8 B-2s heading out because there's probably one KC-135 assigned at this point to each B-2, and there's a B-2 probably traveling maybe a half a mile or a mile behind every KC-135 in this formation, in each one. So that's probably what I would say at this point. And also the fact is that they probably are refueling them, but also I have to remind you all that they do have the ability to sustain and supply these B-2s once they make it to Diego Garcia. But if they're loaded up with munitions already and they're flying out with a full load of ordnance in their bomb bays, that's actually suggesting that once they make it to Diego Garcia, they're going to be refueled. The crews will get a little bit of rest, and then they're going to wake up and go right to bombing Iran. And they're not even going to have enough time to load the ordnance onto them because that's how quickly they're going to have to get out and get to action. So that also may be showing us that this is actually going to be happening over the weekend again. But that is still quite interesting. I would suggest, though, that this probably means that there's about 8 B-2s up there at the moment getting refueled as they took off from Whiteman, and now all of them are going to be on their way out to the area around Hawaii where they'll be refueled again, and then they'll take on, back out into the open and then make their way on to Diego Garcia, maybe needing one more refueling along the way.
The crazy part is there's a Southwest Airlines flight that's about to pass right by this formation. It's literally flying parallel to it in the opposite direction. They could literally look out their window and tell us what it is. They could literally look out there. Don't take a picture of it, by the way, if you're on that flight, because I'm not going to say the name of the flight either, but there is a Southwest flight flying by. I wish I was a fly in that plane so I could look out the window and see exactly what was in tow to these tankers right here. I think we know what's in tow pretty much, but I would love to see it, or at least have a picture of it. Just hang on the wall, I would say.
Man, oh my goodness. Wouldn't that be one hell of a picture to have, man, of 4 KC-135s in stagger formation? It's reaching out into the horizon, and then 4 B-2s following behind all 4 of those Stratotankers. That'd be one hell of a photo op right there. I'm telling you, man, that's like train spotting in the skies. That would be unreal to see.
Yeah, that's true. It would be unreal to see.
But it's
and also
black
it's
out
nighttime.
there.
It's nighttime, so they're not going to be able to see it
there.
anyway. They get a nice picture of, I guess you could say, the lights, if there are any turned on. But I'd imagine there probably are, though, because they're flying through our domestic space, so there probably would be lights. But let's see here. Let's see. I'm trying to get some more information. This is like going viral, by the way. There's news about the B-2s. People are going berserk about this, obviously for good reason, because it's huge news. I'm trying to get some more information here about this because there is some more information here coming out. Let's see here. People were talking about how unstealthy the B-2s are. Well, it's unstealthy because they got tankers flying in front of them. That's why, for the moment at least. They won't need that forever. They just need that to get there. But let's see. Let's see. Looking for more information while I'm sort of yapping here. Sadly, I don't have anything else, but I will keep looking, though. There's a lot of information coming out about it right this second.
That would be. I wish we could get some confirmation of how. Well, we'll get confirmation from the satellite pictures taken at Diego Garcia probably in a day of what actually got there. I'm guessing it's 8 B-2 bombers at this point. You know what? I'm actually going to create a bet on that. Matthew, how many B-2s do you think there is? Do you think it's 8, or do you think it's a different number?
It's kind of hard to say. Let's see here. What was the deployment? Let's see.
Because remember the last deployment to Diego Garcia, it was 8 because they had 4 in the hangar and then 4 out in the open tarmac. And it looked like that was their max capacity for B-2s was 8. So I think it's 8 again.
So I'm going to say it's going to be 5 to 6 of them. Most likely 6 B-2s we're probably seeing on the way. I don't think it's going to be as high as 8. I think it's probably going to be 6. We did see the last time that they were there that apparently... Oh, wait, hold on. Let's see here. Also, remember, by the way, we still have B-52s. I forgot that. We still have B-52s currently at Diego Garcia right now. I was just reminded by that. I went back and looked at some of my old posts I made. So there's 4 B-52 bombers at Diego Garcia. And I think about 6 B-2 stealth bombers are going to be joining the B-52s, which will be probably the case. Right now, I'm not seeing any more information about it. There might already be some B-2s at Diego Garcia that maybe we're not able to see from the satellite images. Possibly they might be in the covered shelters.
Yeah, that's true. These covered shelters I think are specifically made to house the B-2, because notice how their doors swing open wide out here, and generally the hangar isn't really deep enough to house anything else but a B-2. So I think these are the ones that are specially made for the B-2.
Probably so. They've got the B-52 sitting off to the right, over there, off to the right of these little pieces here. Or actually, I think I'm looking at it backwards. Hold on, let me orient myself real quick and figure out what I'm looking at. So no, I'm actually correct. They actually have. Let's see.
Can you repost it on our Twitter so we can all look at it here?
Yeah, I'm gonna actually put under our likes tabs. I've already reposted it once, so check the likes. You'll see. Click on this map. This is a satellite image that's as recent as June the 9th of this month. So about 11 days ago. There's 4 B-52s here in this image that you'll see. There appears to be 2 to the right of the shelters. There's 1 in the middle of the shelters and maybe 1 adjacent as well. And then you see the F-15s also sitting in front of a few of them. But I think inside those shelters, there might be already, I would assume, maybe 2 B-2s already there, but they're going to be joined by some more. Probably a total, or not a total, but probably about 6 more arriving for a total of maybe 8 that will be there.
I think so. So you're saying now you think it's 8 bombers as well?
Yeah, I think it's 8 because I forgot that the shelters were there, and there's also, it's obviously made for the B-2, so they probably already have 2 there. I think there was some previous intel that 2 were already stationed here at Diego Garcia, and there's 6 on the way. I do believe that 6 are on the way, not 8. So it'll probably be a total of 8, including the ones that are already on the ground.
Interesting. We'll have to see. I'm still shooting with a number that's probably 8, because I don't think they would send up 2 backup fuel tankers, because all the tankers that were sent up had to have been operational and with no failures on board. So I think they have the 8 tankers up for 8 B-2s at the moment. But we'll see. We'll definitely get satellite pictures to confirm if there's 8 or 2 or 6 that showed up or what. But Matthew's saying 6, I'm saying 8. One of us is going to be wrong here tomorrow or the next day. We'll see who. But that'll be an interesting one. One of us is going to have to eat feet or eat our foot, more so, to clarify what that joke is. Because we're not Harvey Weinstein here. We're not in defeat. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best we can. Very interesting news, though, that's coming out at the moment. And also, why is Diego Garcia red?
This one, I don't know really why it was red, to be honest with you. I think that was a quirk with the satellite imagery for some reason. I'm not really sure why, though.
Yeah, I was wondering if the commies took over. I was like, damn, the whole thing's red. Like, I was like, it looks like Mao has been here. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to get on to the next one. Also, Matthew, how many super chats do we have left?
We have about 30 left.
All right, we're going to have to start knocking those out. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
So this one goes to Alaska, who puts in a 10, and thank you very much, Alaska, for that $10 support. We also have a 10 from JC Atkins, who said, I don't always give my hard-earned money online, but when I do, it's to the Enforcer channel. And keep with the great word, gentlemen, and take a question from the chat from your favorite Navy, NCO.
Hey, and thank you so much for support from our favorite Navy NCO. Not our OG Ellison Bosun, though. That goes to Walter E. Lakota. And I got to thank you massively for the support and helping this channel to keep rolling, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to be here right now. So huge thanks to you once again. And we are on to the next one.
Also, someone said, I'm listening to another channel, and they're going nuts because someone said it's a training exercise. Honestly, I don't think it's a training exercise. I think that's an active deployment that we're seeing out of Whiteman. It's too large of a deployment. So I think it probably would be an active one that's going to Diego Garcia. It could be training. We've seen training out there before. Obviously, they train with them, but I think this is an active deployment, especially when you take the context of the current threats against Iran. It lines up almost perfectly. And also the NOTAM down in Hawaii matches up as well. So I think they're clearly heading to Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean. But moving on here to our next one, we're going to take a live chat question on our other super chat. This one goes to Dontarius, who said, any word on the positions of other Arab countries on this potential war?
Pretty much all of them are going to be neutral and not joining in any offensive actions against Iran. The only one who's joined in at all is Jordan, and it's largely for air defense purposes. So I hope that answers the question well. Thank you once again, JC, for sponsoring that live chat, and we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Paul Weekly, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Paul, for that support. He said, thank you again for your dedication and hard work.
And thank you, Paul, for enjoying our dedication and hard work and supporting it. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we got a 10 from Daniel, who said, so I've read reports that it might take as many as 30 mops to fully destroy the Fordo nuclear site. And do y'all think it's a wise choice of munitions when China is building their new command underground? And roll tide.
And I would say, yes, it's a good use of munitions. The Iranians are trying to create a nuclear weapon, so I would say we should use any and all resources necessary to be able to destroy their nuclear program. I also would say it probably wouldn't take that many mops. It would probably only take a handful, maybe 5 or less, to be able to deal with the Fordo facility, in my opinion at least. But a big thanks to you once again. I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
And we have a $10 super chat from Blacklight. And they said Israel would be planning for dealing with something like Fordo for decades. And do you think Israel might have made a nuclear bunker buster?
They probably do have some sort of a nuclear weapon that could probably knock out Fordo, but I don't think the Israelis would ever use it because then officially they would become a nuclearized power as of that day. And it would be a shock to everyone on the diplomatic stage. So with that, I hope that has addressed it the best I can. A big thanks to you once again. And we are on to the next one.
And we got a $6 support from Jason Curling. And Jason said, thank you for working overtime and on these special streams lately.
And thank you so much for enjoying our overtime work. We are more than proud to do it, and we love to know that we can. And a big thanks to you once again, and we're going to get another one.
And we have one from Brian Roy, who puts in a 5. He said, it's like Saturday morning cartoons, except it's every day, and I don't remember the existential dread being so prevalent.
Yeah, it kind of is. I wouldn't worry about the existential dread too much. I always look at it as this. If we die, we die. It is what it is. I mean, we really can't change it too much. We just have to do what we have to do. And there's an element of risk to it, but we really don't have a choice at this point with a lot of this stuff. But a big thanks to you once again. I hope that does address it the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Ryan Johnson, who puts in a 5. He said, what do you think will happen now that the statement that Iran could have a bomb in 15 days was made at the UN? And I wonder if some tech came from China.
I would doubt if tech came from China, but considering that statement's being made, it's generally being made by the IAEA, which has been saying stuff like this for a really long time, actually for about a year. And I think that's the reason why the United States is really starting to get a little bit gung-ho with trying to get going, and the Israelis are also saying, we'll have to do it with or without America. And so with that, I hope that it addresses that well. Big thanks to you once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a $5 super chat from Annoyed AF, who said, no one here seems to be worried about getting into another forever war, and this is deeply worrisome. Honestly, it's not going to be a forever war. It's going to be a quick one. We're sending the B2s, it sounds like. So it's going to be very swift. Very quick. Some say the fastest ever. But Enforcer, what say you?
This is going to be so quick. It's going to be called the In-N-Out Burger War. We're going to be in and out in 20 minutes. But I got to say, no one's ever done it like us. We're going to bomb the hell out of them. And it's going to be a pretty easy kind of a war. I mean, we're just going to, we're going to bomb them to where the government goes into hiding. And if they go into hiding or get killed, it creates a power vacuum either way. So they can either get killed and try and keep the government alive until they get killed, or they can go into hiding and then they'll create a power vacuum and then the government collapses anyways. Either way, we end up achieving what we wanted to with airstrikes alone and didn't have to get involved in the nitty gritty of getting in on the ground and doing a forever war and all that. And also at the same time, we can't so our logic here with that statement, I gotta say, is if it took a forever war to defeat Hitler, we just weren't going to do that either. Like if it's too long to deal with something that is in our inherent interest to stop because they could end up killing us all in the future eventually, we're not going to deal with it because it takes too long. That's like saying the house is flooding because a water main is busted heading into our house, but we're not going to try and deal with it because it take too long to deal with it, so we're just going to let the house eventually get filled with mold and then collapse in on itself in about a year because it would take too much to try and fix this water main that's busted under our house. It doesn't really make too much sense when you think about it like that, because sometimes you just have to do what you have to do, and whatever follows, that's just kind of how the world works. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to LSA Sergeant Figment, who puts in a 5. And he said, we made it to New Jersey, and saying goodbye to Florida was hard, but worth it. And LSA, hit the like button. That's an order.
Hey, and a good thing that you made it back up to New Jersey. A pretty cool place, actually. And I got to thank you so much for support. You've been here with us as you've moved from New Jersey to Florida a couple of times, I believe, actually. And I hope that you enjoyed up there in New Jersey. And a big thanks to you once again. I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
And big shout out to the B-Man for the $5 support as well. And we do appreciate it, Mr. B-Man. And thank you very much for that support. And we also have a 5 from Terrence Custer, who said, did you hear the Mossad prank called a bunch of Iranian Air Force commanders and set up a fake meeting? And you know what happened next? And they got a bunch, apparently, in LSA.
Matthew, did that actually happen? I don't think I've heard of that.
So I believe, if I have the story correct, I believe Mossad set up a robocall system that apparently called with an AI voice and told these Iranian leaders to meet at a certain place. If I have the story correct, somebody correct me if I'm wrong. And I believe the Iranian commanders decided that it was a legitimate call because apparently the AI was so convincing that they believed, oh, hey, look, that's the fellow over there, and he's telling me to go to a meeting. So they went to the meeting, and turned out the meeting was a bust.
Huh. I actually didn't hear about that, and I thank you for sharing that with me and supporting the channel and helping her to keep rolling. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And this one goes to Matt Acosta, who said 5.2 magnitude earthquake in central Iran just now. What do you think?
Probably seismic activity, unless someone tells us otherwise. On those, I just generally kind of hold judgment. We've seen so many earthquakes in Iran over the past 2 years, and all of them have turned into nothing. I generally just kind of default to it's kind of normal seismic activity at this point. But we're on to the next one.
And this one goes to South Carolina Deer Girl, who puts in a 5 as well, and says, it looks like it's going to be time to out what makes the green grass grow.
Oh, fertilizer's what makes the green grass grow, and sometimes the fertilizer's got to be some Iranian top generals. And so a big thanks to you once again. I hope that does address that well, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Dustin Gray, who puts in a 5. He said, first time here, definitely not my last, and wonderful work, gents.
And thank you so much for enjoying our wonderful work, because we try our best. So a huge thanks once again, and we're on to the next one.
The next one goes to Jay Wilder, who puts in a 5. He said, can't we sell 4 bunker busters to them and give them 72 hours to use so we aren't involved? They don't have the delivery system. That's the problem. They don't have the B2s. We'd have to lend them a couple of those. I don't think we're too keen on lending anybody the B2s. But Enforcer, what say you?
That's the perfect answer, actually. We can't really... They don't have a delivery system. So we give them the bomb, but we can't give them the way to actually use it. So it's kind of like giving someone bullets, but they don't have a gun. That's kind of what we would be doing with the Israelis at that point. So with that, I hope that addresses it well. Thank you once again. And we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Brian Balling, who puts in a 5. He said, would taking out the Ayatollah end the war on Iran?
I think it probably would. I think if we took out the Ayatollah, it would probably create power struggles in the government that would devolve into chaos, and then a new government could form out of that somehow. So with that, I hope that does address that well. I thank you once again, and we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Wen Theriot, who puts in a 5. They said, what are y'all's best guess as to why China was in Iran? And thank you.
I don't even know. I think it may have been some sort of diplomatic staff, maybe that they're dropping off or evacuating from there. Maybe that could have been a possibility because the Chinese do have an embassy in Iran, so those aircraft could have been there for that, or they could have been dropping off some stuff to the Iranian government. But it's certainly not nuclear. That I would be sure of. And so with that, a big thanks to you once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 5 from Zugun, who says Schrodinger's Khameini.
Schrodinger's Khameini. I love to use the Schrodinger joke because a lot of people actually do get it. It's kind of a bit of a nerdy one because the Schrodinger theory was that if you put a cat in the box, and you close the box where you can't see inside of it, you don't really know if the cat is dead or alive if it's not making any noise, and you can't really observe anything in the box because it has something to do with quantum theory. Like if you're not able to observe something, you don't really know its current state, and so I think that's the Schrodinger's theory, if I'm remembering it correctly. So whenever anyone's hiding anywhere and we can't ever confirm whether they're dead or alive, or whether something is just out of sight and we can't really confirm anything, I always say it's Schrodinger something, and Schrodinger's Khameini has actually caught on a lot lately. Like a lot of people started to say that Schrodinger's Khameini thing all over the place. It's pretty funny, actually. But a big thanks to you once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, Schrodinger's cat was alive and dead at the same time. It was a quantum mechanics, I guess you could say, demonstration. So I guess Khameini is alive and dead at the same time. I guess he's dead on the inside and alive on the outside.
He's somewhere in the
now,
Twilight Zone.
It's somewhere in there. Some say that he's a poor, sad sap that just happens to live a measly existence in the Twilight. But anyway,
let me do the right Rod Serling thing, man. We're gonna do it. You see Khameini on the radio. He's like, "I want them killed. I want them," and then it's like, "This is Ali Khameini, a sad guy with a beard that looks like he's been living in his mother's basement for 30 years. A real loser. But this loser is about to be going somewhere where the light doesn't shine in the basement. In fact, he's about to go to the Twilight Zone." Like that's how Rod Serling would do an intro on it. Yeah, you would absolutely roast the hell out of everyone in every intro ever. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Cheater Meter. Once again, he puts in the 5. It said, if the U.S. attacks, do you think the Saudis or Qatar Air Forces would get in or aid the attack?
Actually, the Saudis did help us in the coalition against the Iraqis in '91. I don't know if they do it again. I know that the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia absolutely hates the Iranians. So maybe the Saudis would join in, but I really can't speak for the Qataris or the Bahrainians because they're more lukewarm on all that sort of stuff, even against groups like Hamas and Hezbollah and such. And so with that, I hope that answers that well. And we are on to the next one.
And up next, big shout out to Alan Woods as well as Plazath, and Plazath once again for a $2 support. And thank you very much, Plazath, for that support as well. And Alan Woods, we also had a 2 from Faith. And we appreciate all of you, Plazath, Faith, and Alan Woods, for that support and also helping to keep the channel running. And we also have a 2 from Jesse Joestar, who said, crab rangoon, baby.
Hey, crab rangoons. I freaking love crab rangoons. Those things were delicious. And so with that, thank you once again. We're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Eric Horner, LSA, who puts in a 2 and said, congrats on all the new subs.
Hey, and thank you so much for the congrats on the new subs. We've actually gained, I think, 76,000 over this past week. It's probably going to be, it's actually going to be about 78,000 after today. So I thank you so much for the congrats because it has been the largest period of channel growth in history, actually. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
And we got a 2 from Anthony Garcia. He said, a lot of bomber noise, Missouri by Highway 50, WAFB. Oh, are you kidding me? Like, y'all could actually hear the bombers taking off. That's actually quite wild
really
right
cool,
there.
Yeah.
That's wild, actually. I wish could have heard that in person. But I can't honestly encourage anybody to take photos or videos of it. Like, seriously speaking, like, don't do that. Like, if you're, like, listening and you're thinking, oh, I want to, like, take pictures. Typically don't do that because it is an OPSEC thing. And even though you have the legal right to take photos of it from a public space, even if they're taking off, typically speaking, it's not good to do that because it does show exactly what is going to be arriving, and it gives the enemy time to figure out exactly when it will be arriving. So that's not a good thing. So it's good to leave them guessing to a certain degree, and obviously they'll find out when they get satellite imagery of Diego Garcia. They'll see how many have showed up. but it's better to let them wait in suspense until then. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to agree. Don't threaten the lives of our service members by taking any pictures that actually would confirm what we're saying on air. Because what we're saying on air is just what we're saying. There's no proof behind it until there's an actual picture of a video, and then you're able to give our enemies a lot to work with. So make sure to never take pictures or photos of anything that the U.S. Armed Forces are doing if you see them. Like if they're flying over the beach down at Destin, you can snap a picture of them there. It's not going to be anything. But if it looks like they're getting involved in future military operations very soon or while you're looking at them, don't take pictures of them. It could threaten their lives. So I do thank you for support and helping this channel to keep on running. But still, that is actually really cool to hear. You could hear them taking off. That was neat. So big thanks once again. And we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to J.C. Denton, who puts in a 10. He said
Hey.
this would be a more fun geopolitical situation if every Middle Eastern country decided to participate directly, speaking purely hypothetically, of course. And P.S. Love the channel.
Hey, and thank you for the kind words, JC10, all the way from Israel. He actually threw in, I think, 30 shekels right there. And I got to say that, in my opinion, I would agree. But of course, some countries in the Middle East are quite fickle, and also some of them are generally unstable too. But still, a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that has addressed that the best we can. And with that, we are going to be moving on to the next one.
And also, by the way, someone said, "You're telling everybody what's going on. Be quiet." We don't know how many B2s are in the air. That's the sensitive information is how many are on the way. Not that it really matters. The fact that the B2s are on the way. I mean, it's not like unless these countries have like piss poor intelligence services, which even Iran, even with their like really low budget and the incompetence that runs wild in Iran, they still can get the information. Like they do have enough of a competent intelligence agency to get the information, and also they can simply ask their buddies in Russia to send it over, and I'm sure they'll be happy to oblige them on that. So they're going to get the information, but let them do the work and don't just post the pictures of exactly what's going over there. Public information like flight radar, they can literally access it just like we access it. Literally type in the link, they go straight to it, and they can see it. So what we're talking about on flight radar is literally publicly available. It's not something you have to be on the ground to get. So that's why it's not the same. But moving on to our next super chat here. This one goes to Paul LeMay, who put in a 10. He said, question, is it a misinterpretation? And I can't read the last part right there, but thank you, Paul LeMay, for that $10 support. We also have a 5 from the Dane Company, who said, is Ukraine getting some German Taurus systems, and German officers are the only ones to operate them with space reconnaissance, Putin stated. And what are your thoughts?
Shh. Achtung! All of those shipments are classified, so we don't know. They might get them, but they might not. But all arms shipments from Germany to Ukraine have now been classified by declaration of the Bundestag, which is the German parliament. So at this moment, we do not know. So I'd have to declare ignorance on that. But I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we got a 5 from Joey Gaming, who said, you guys are my all-time favorite news YouTube channel, and thank you for everything you do. And also, do you plan on opening up a Discord server?
Hey, I thank you for support. We don't have a plan on opening a Discord server soon. We used to have some way back in the day. Generally, it was never a good thing. Like, it always devolved into a bad thing, so we got rid of them all and never had one again. And also, it takes a lot on our plate to actually be able to manage direct Enforcer-affiliated, not Enforcer-affiliated, but directly controlled Enforcer channel Discords. Those are usually, they take up a lot of time and also adds a lot of stress. So probably not in the future, but there are fan servers of the Enforcer channel that you can join. And Miss Disa actually is the head of one of the more significant ones. And so with that, I hope that has addressed that well. I thank you once again for support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Sun Wukong, who puts in a 2 and said, I did a Gronk search, and he did drink, but not much. Nixon.
And I thank you for support, and I thank you for clarifying that, because I thought that he didn't drink because he was a Quaker. He was an damn Quaker. Quaker oats. But still, a big thanks to you once again. And with that, we are on to the next one. And can you believe that, folks? A Quaker in Southern California. Like, that just sounds unheard of, because if y'all know anything, the Quakers are from Pennsylvania. And so, like, when I found out that he was actually from Southern California and a Quaker, I was like, how the hell was he a Quaker in Southern California? That just seems to be the farthest place away in the lower 48 from Pennsylvania possible. I was like, how the hell? But anyways, he was. It was a very interesting thing about him. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to two hot dog guys, one cup of snow, who puts in the 10. Who said a pimp marmot send-off, and LSA, Slava Ukraine, and thank you both.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support. And we would do a pimp marmot send-off, but it's gotten a little late in the night. And so we will have to be passing on that, unfortunately. But a big thanks to you once again. And maybe we'll be able to do a pimp marmot, hopefully here in the near future, or a marmot at all. But a big thank you to you once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Ryan S., who puts in a 2. And they said about 30 miles from Whiteman, and they're moving.
Oh, and I thank you for the support and sharing that info with us and helping this channel to keep running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Quasi, who puts in a 1. And thank you very much, Quasi, as well. And we do appreciate that very much. And thank you very much, Quasi, for supporting the channel. And it is now time, folks, to jump on to our live chat questions proper and our Morse code decoders. Tonight, we had Paul Schultz, Kevin J., Mason Miami, Joni Dog, Norm Pritchett, Arabelle Garbo. They said the Morse code says Russia and Iran are clearly enemies of the Republic and the Western world. And on to victory, LLT, LSA.
And ding! That's the sound of money. Y'all hit the jackpot dead on the nail. That was the Morse code message of the night. I got to congratulate the Lee Spring Army Signal Corps for getting that correct 1,213 days in a row, because only y'all have the knack of reading Morse code. So an amazing thanks to y'all once again. And with that, we are going to be getting 3 live chat questions due to time constraints tonight, and then rounding her out. And so with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night.
All right, so this one goes to Azem, who said, there are Russian scientists in one nuclear site, and do you think this will deter Israel or the United States from striking the site?
I generally think we will not hit the site because it's an active nuclear power plant of a power-producing variety, meaning that hitting it and causing a meltdown would cause significant radiological damage, not only to Iran, but to our surrounding allies and their security assurance sphere in the region. So I think that's generally what will ensure a lack of a strike at the Bushehr nuclear power plant site. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And we have a question from Live Animal once again. They said, does the USA think that anything lesser than a regime change will destroy the nuclear program for the next decade or 2 decades?
At least it seems that the U.S. currently believes that a destruction of the nuclear program itself will stop nuclearization largely in its tracks. So yes, there is something that we believe can be done lesser than regime change that will actually stop the nuclearization of Iran. The Israelis, though, are shooting for a complete regime change now as well. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the final question of the night. So who is the lucky last person to throw in the lucky last question of the night?
And this one also goes to Aldo, actually, this one goes to, Aldo, I think. He said, would it be beneficial to the United States to allow the Saudis to get involved?
I would say yes. I mean, the Saudis actually have quite a significant air force. So if they got involved, it would help out a good bit. It's just that I don't really know if the Saudis currently have the kind of diplomatic appetite to be able to see a direct conflict against the Iranians. That might not be viewed too well by multiple Islamic countries in the region, and considering that the Saudis kind of ideologically try and stay on the middle road with everyone, they don't really want to soil their relationships with other countries that are lukewarm, like the UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, and so on. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. But with that, we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I've got to thank you all so much once again for watching tonight. It's been an absolute honor and a pleasure to be able to cover this news for all of y'all. Enforcer Matt and me find this to be a great honor to have covered the news for 260,000 people tonight, with a peak viewership of about 28,000 people here. We thank you all so much once again for watching, and of course, we will see you all tomorrow either in a short war summary, or in a major breaking news stream, or in a normal nightly news stream at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die.
And with that, folks, thank you all for joining us yet again, and all 260,000 people that were here by stream in, and we appreciate every single viewer on the channel, and we do appreciate, of course, all the viewership over the years as well, including tonight as well, on day 1213 of the War News stream. And we will see you all tomorrow on the next stream, tomorrow night, at our usual time, or maybe even earlier than that, if there is breaking news. With the B2s on the way, I have a feeling we might have some breaking news. But you'll also hear from the Enforcer on a short war video if there is enough news to cover midday, and we'll see you all tomorrow. And with that, bye-bye for now.
Forever. Islam is